really taken the development community with you and explained it. We don't really get it, the finer nuances of what that means. Where's the tension between what your obligations are to respond to the NPSUD, and because you could direct a lot of some of those obligations into the IF regime. So we need to explain how does it work, what are where does it start and where does it leave. In terms of, if I talk to the development contribution policy in 2, support the remission in the CBD. In my 3, I'm saying at a minimum, you ask for whether additional criteria should be introduced. I'm saying yep. Empower the design panel, offer more flexibility to it. That's in my A1. Look at scale, additional capacity, both housing and commercial space, and look at whether aggregation is occurring. Look at the contribution to the CBD renewal, and also whether it's, what's its connection to the transport infrastructure and that you're either enabling or is already there. In terms of the DC remission of 100% for 6 or more stories, I'm supporting that. Basically also suggesting that it be extended to include the residential intensification zone. I've provided a map. You can look at that later just to identify where my particular sites are and also what the extent of that zone is. I'm basically saying, look, it's for a 3-year period, but it's subject to the rationale and qualifications that I've outlined. So I'll talk you through those. In terms of the policy commitment, it's for a short period. It is to say the fiscal costs, as I don't see it as, I see it as being manageable. You can measure the effectiveness at the end of that period. It should encourage development of scale. That's what it's geared to, and I think it's going to do that. I think we need population growth in both the CBD and city fringe, and that's going to encourage it. I think they both work together. They're complementary, likely to contribute to resilience, diversity, amenity and wellbeing over time. Talking specifically to the inclusion of the residential intensification zone, I'm saying it's basically consistent with the NPSUD, with greater density of development and scale sought in areas within a very walkable distance of the CBD, and that aligns with, my understanding is it aligns with Hamilton City's aspirations for a walkable and livable city. Inclusion of the residential intensification zone in areas adjacent to strategic transport corridors is qualified basically at a minimum 4 levels for sites greater than 1,000 square metres, including by aggregation. I talked to some of the criteria that I believe you could introduce in terms of in terms of incentives. I'm talking about height, density, site coverage. You don't actually, that it can be non-financial incentives. So you can offer bonus floor area, as I say, density, height, but they should be deployed subject to urban design, built form, amenity, and wellbeing criteria. Just spelling out clearly that I'm looking for that policy to apply to sites that I've named there, but I haven't actually, I've put Victoria Street, but I've been remiss, I don't think I've put Gwyn Street. And basically what I've done is just provided a table of what the opportunity is here. I'm saying currently there's two houses on Gwyn, 1 on Victoria, that's 3. Under the ODP, you could probably, sort of it would be easy to deliver a total of 7. If you look at a medium density scenario, you're looking at 27. If you're looking at the operative district plan with higher density, that's 60. And if you're looking at that informed by the NPS urban development, you're looking at 75 to 90. So it just gives you an idea of kind of how you can leverage particular sites. We think ours is a gateway site, but I'm just not talking about ours. I'm talking about what's the opportunity here, and I think you should be encouraging scale. All right, and you can filter you can manage your fiscal cost by, if you like, taking your tools that you've got and say, okay, what does that look like for us for over 1,000 square metres? As I say, you can use your own discretion with that. Talking about support the social housing remission under 5, Certainly support the caps on non-residential DC charges. And then I talk a little bit about NIDIA. NIDIA is something I've had a little bit to do with. And in the past, when I've had to respond to, assessment, it's always been a high growth scenario. Here we're looking at low growth, and if I look at the cynic in me, saying that's perpetuating an underspend of CAPEX. It's basically taking the pressure off council to respond. So I'm looking at what's the causal nexus to growth in my 7. What's underway, what can be reasonably expected, and is it going to lead to an understatement of capital expenditure? Saying before the LTP is finalised and adopted, I'd like to see the current run rate of growth measured against NIDIA low, medium and high, also against historical and forecast growth, and compare that to the veracity of the NIDIA growth rate adopted and make sure it's independently verified for your own sake. All right, so that, I think I tried to really keep that succinct. In terms of the transport, I support the micro-mobility aspiration. I think my issue really is I don't think you're taking the people with you. What does the template for that look like citywide over time? And what displacement of current usage do you need to get, as well as growth, to make it work compared to the spend? Anyway, okay. So I could talk to that a lot more, but so I'm basically saying, yeah, I support the safer routes for biking and micro-mobility, provided you optimise funding from NZTA, central government and others. In other words, if you're out of sync with them, don't do it. Unless it's advance funded, right? And you have a funding arrangement like that with those providers. Look at the existing bridge structures, because I see it, they're the main thoroughfares. You need to see what's your core infrastructure, where you're trying to get it right. I think the bridges where you start, Woodrow Bridge, I don't see as fit for purpose. I've been alongside it for 40 years. I'm saying it's not configured right for all modes. You've got the not enough room there for pedestrians and micromobility users, requires attention. No suicide prevention infrastructure, that gets used. There was one last year and he lived, so, this is a whole of not just about mobility, it's about safety, and it goes for all members of our population. No barrier exists above so alongside the road, you've got to step up to the pedestrian level, no barrier there. That's just an absolute prerequisite. We see the thoroughfare there at night, people are intoxicated, they need help from themselves. All right, so my request is to move Woodrow Bridge capacity from underfunded to funded. Leaving as is, from my perspective, it's inconsistent with Council's 20-minute and multimodal transport strategy. Okay, at the very least, that capacity needs to be designed and implementation ready to capture NZTA and central government funding if and when it becomes available. Well, you already get some subsidy if it's leveraged, if it's higher, you need to be positioned to go for it. In terms of my 10, I'm looking at the Ohapo Road corridor there. I don't see anything, and I've been through all your funded and unfunded proposals. I don't see anything on that congested area that's, we've done a lot of work there over the years, and we know it just comes to a standstill at certain times. It needs micro-simulation tools to understand what's causing it. And I'm basically saying it needs to be ready for growth. One, firstly, to address what's already happening there, but also to position it for growth and the ultimate transfer of that corridor to NZ, so Hamilton City's responsibility. Southern Links, I've submitted to the RLTP, and I personally don't think it gets enough promotion. I'd like to see it elevated alongside the Cambridge Priory route to one of equivalence or ahead of it. Obviously, I know you would need the agreement of your partners. And I'm saying, well, that's a project you can complete. You can cater for housing growth, and it achieves optimal efficiency and movement of freight and people straight away. Whereas Cambridge Priority I see as a building block of many. As I say, I'm I heard what John Gallagher had to say the other day. He would like to see it delivered, but look, we know we're just a small voice here. We're just encouraging you to beat the drum, right? Beat the drum, whatever opportunity you can. Cambridge Priory gets a lot of airtime. I don't think this does. All right, I know you can only do so much, and Dave and I have certainly talked about this before. In terms of paid commuter parking around the fringe, as I see it, I'm looking for the master plan of transport initiatives. This is in my 12A. That's yet to be produced. Provides a blueprint for an integrated approach to manage, limit, or decongest current and planned transport corridors. Any master plan would need to be peer reviewed by suitably qualified independent transport planners, urban designers, and be subject to consultation, public consultation. Expected to be included in that master plan are initiatives that, such as where are the locations of park and ride around the CBD, shuttle service to and from the CBD, co-design with public transport, alternative modes of transport, and routes necessary to realise the 20-minute city aspiration. Where are the locations, storage locations for micromobility devices? What are the techniques that you're going to develop? And you need to articulate those for current and anticipated development within the fringe area that maintains current level of service and amenity. And then basically my CEDA I basically tell you what's wrong with the proposal. Pretty much I see it's counterintuitive to your realisation of intensification objectives. I think it's one of my key points. In terms of my 14, I'll go to my 14, the sub-regional wastewater treatment plant that I've referred to as in my footnote there, just as to where it is and what you've notified. I'm basically saying it's a capital program. It talks about investing now, but it puts it in unfunded. To me, that's inconsistent. You're saying we've got to do it now, we've got to capture Waipa's investment, its interest, but it's in the future. And from where I sit, I don't know if that's strategic, I'm not quite sure. Anyway, just raising it. That's pretty much me.
Thank you very much, Peter. I just mentioned that we have a couple of councillors on Zoom with us, just so that that can be included on record that they are here with us. And I've got a question for them. So online we have, can you tell me? You've got Martin, Angela, Martin, Kesh. Is that it? Yes. So Angela, Martin and Kesh are on Zoom at this point in time. And Angela has a question.
Yes, thank you. Good morning. Thank you, Mayor Southgate. Thank you, Peter, for your submission. I think I heard you correctly with your opinion on the NIDIA the growth projection through NIDIA that we use. Yeah. And that it was, you believe it's probably, our projections are probably lower than they should be, and you're suggesting a peer review. You would know, Peter, you take a lot of interest in what Council does in our finances, that our, where our debt is heading in this 10-year plan, close to, or I think it does reach $1 billion. We've got our HIF loan. So if we, if it works out that we do this peer review, and I certainly know my good friend Councillor McPherson would possibly agree with that it turns out that the NIDIA projections need to be raised. In your opinion, Peter, how would we possibly fund that extra capital growth program?
Well, look, I think the first thing is get it right. Let's not kid ourselves. We don't want to be a taronga. I was speaking to a good developer friend of mine yesterday who's got extensive experience over there. He said that was consistently funded, funded in its LTP by about 30% over 20 years. We don't want a repeat of that. In terms of the funding side of it, it comes down to hard choices. But when I looked at your leveraging, you could go straight up to your debt limit and you would have to hold that position for longer.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Appreciate your submission. Thanks, Peter.
Stamina. Debt stamina.
That's a new terminology that might get used now. We've gone off pivot.
You need 5 cents every time it's used.
Yeah. We don't want any pivoting, but we can go with that. Thank you. There are questions on the board. There is Councillor Pascoe.
Thanks for your presentation, Peter. Just following on from Councillor Angela's question and the Nydia growth model, do you think that there are organisations in New Zealand who are competent to do, perhaps the word competent is unfair, who are experienced enough to do a peer review of population growth figures and get it right, or get it close to right, when we have previously used a Nydia growth model based on historical growth of the city?
Well, I think the issue with the Nydia model that was being used was it was based on a statistical census data that was outdated. So in other words, its start point was, would you say, superseded. It was already old. Not quite sure. So they've updated that starting point. I'm not quite sure. I noticed Colin Jones referred to urban economics yesterday. He's a guy I've used myself. He would be a guy who would know. I mean, you have to look. I can't tell you the person.
You think the people are there to do it?
I think so. I can tell you he did the modelling for the Auckland Unitary Plan, and Judge Kirkpatrick, or David Kirkpatrick, who's now the Chief Environment Court Judge, he used to be my counsel, and he does not suffer fools lightly, that guy. He knows what he's doing. So, yeah, you could find out. He might be a good starting point. I'm not sure who, Nydia, I know they are part of Waikato University, but yeah.
Okay, thank you. And the second question is in respect to your submission on the introduction of the government compliance targeted rate.
Yep.
And I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but are you suggesting there that we should be effectively jam-jarring the expenditure on those two government induced items and using the targeted rate specifically for that, so that if and when those costs are no longer required, we then need to make the decision as to whether the targeted rate gets removed?
Yeah, that's correct. That's in part correct. And also I'd like to say, well, okay, if there is the sea change and transfer of three waters to a CCA or whatever, what does that look like? Give us a feel for it. We don't know. Is it going to be good or bad? I think I read a chair's report from Dave the end of March, which basically I took it from might be even positive. As I say, take us with you. We don't know. We're on this journey. We're in the dark. We're in the dark on a few things.
And certainly we don't know how much the government are going to toss into the barrel either at this stage. So they may fund some of it.
But do we know in principle that what you commit to in your LTP, they assume? Because if that was the case, you'd be best to load it up. You know what I'm...
I get the gist, and I think that has been part of the thinking.
So as I say, take us with you, explain, tell us what you know. You can't tell us what you don't know, but tell us what you know.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Councillor Thompson.
Cool. Thank you, Peter, for your submission. My question was around the biking micromobility, and you said that we need to do more to kind of take the community with us. And I was wondering, then you talked later on about a transport master plan. Is that kind of what you're referring to, or what? Can you just expand on that a little bit more?
Yeah, so the transport master plan would basically, firstly, you have to say, what is our ambition here? What cars, what level of transport, are we looking to create usage in other modes? What is our level of ambition? How many users do we need, are looking to displace off the roads, and how are we going to deal with growth? In other words, a standstill situation is you've got to arrest current usage and growth. Okay, what does that look like? Then you've got to develop a master plan, and I think you'll find when you start to develop that master plan, you're looking at you've got to provide places, park and ride. People drop their car in. I've heard some of the submitters, and they're distressed by this. They're workers and they're people who are in this area. But okay, so let's take all that out of it and say, okay, what are the bolts that we need to pull together? What are the nuts and bolts of this that we need to make it work? And I'll spelt out in my point or whatever. what I think some of the core elements of the master plan should be in my 12A and 12B. All right, so rather than talking to them again, maybe have a read. Feel free to give me a call. I'm happy, because what I want is I want you to take me with you and convince me. And you haven't. I'm in the affected area, been in there for a long time. Convince me that it's workable. Some of your park and ride facilities could be repurposed into, if you ever have light rail. I'm just looking at the big picture. Tell us, where are these? How does this all fit together? And there's a lot of parts that I think you need to think about. And I know it may be early days. I'm not seeing this as an early day proposal. I'm saying it's proposed, right? All right.
Thank you. Thank you, that's clear. There are no further questions. Thank you for taking the time to write your submissions and then come to speak to it. It's appreciated.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Go and get some sleep.
Next up, we have Rob. And it says here, on behalf of your because we see you in various different capacities, don't we? And so you're talking on Northern United Sports Club.
Yes, I'm not here about property, so there's plenty of other people who do that for me today, no doubt. Hey, thank you everyone. I'm here on behalf of the Northern United Sports Club, assuming you've read the submission. Northern United Sports Club was merged in 2016. It was Hukanui Rototuna Football Club and Hamilton North Football Club. They've now gone on to officially be the largest football and futsal club in the Waibot Federation, and we're also forecasted to significantly grow over the next decade. We're largely based in the northern suburbs of Hamilton. We've currently got 1,381 members, 900 of which are juniors and youth ranging from age 5 to 14. And that's in sport offerings from football, futsal and netball. So we're also the largest user of the peak. We're also the largest use. Our fields that we play on are predominantly the highest yielded sports grounds in the city. So that's Korikori, Ashurst Park, Discovery Park and Grosvenor. And obviously no doubt some of you would have been driving through the northern suburbs in winter on Thomas Road and saying, well, what are all these kids and cars doing here blocking the roads? We've got a complement. Actually, the last LTP hearings, I think the previous president stood up and they were lobbying for the Rototuna Sports Ground, which is now Korikori Park. It's a fantastic facility. It's world class. If you go down there in winter, it's got youth age group players from Rototuna Junior High School, the Christian School, Northern United. Last year had Dio, had Wanderers. It's got Northern United. So it's a fantastic facility. The grounds are holding up really well. So what predominantly we're here for today is to talk about finishing off the master plan, which is up on the screen. So there's a number of I think three-quarters of the job's done, but I think it's really important for us. We'd really like to see the community clubhouse go in at the far end of the car park. So I don't have a dot, and you probably can't see it, but where the number 1 picture is on the angle, which is there is the car. Oh, there we go. So if you scroll up the other way, yep, there's a big, large car park there. Go south. So keep scrolling down. Or up.
Hey, it's technology.
A bit more. There you go. If you go to the top there. Yeah.
So that large car park where it says 10 and 9.
Yep, 10 and 9. That's it. That's so that car park's in, and it's great. It's every time there's a training, it's pretty full. But one of the great things about this facility, when it was master planned right, is that it provides the car parks. So when you go to Thomas Road and you see Grosvenor, when you've got 6 fields there and hundreds of people there every hour. That's potentially, it's an accident waiting to happen. We've been talking to staff about it for a long time. It's very hard for us to stop kids kicking balls on the road, and some kids get a bit excited and want to run on there. So sports grounds like this are definitely the way of the future, and we encourage council to continue building these multi-purpose, multi-community use sports fields. But at the top end of the car park, there's a future sports club facility. We don't want it for ourselves. In the dark ages, and no doubt you've got plenty of sports clubs in the city who, they have a preordained right to these facilities. They don't. It is a community park. It's for the community. We would like to see that a building built for shared use of the community. It's got the car parking there. It's got the amenities there. I know you're building the Rototuna hub, and that's well in its consultation and design period process, but it's just too far removed from the fields. When we have, you'll find in the next 2 terms, school terms, we'll have 200 youth there between 3 and 5 on the hour. It'll be great for us. We train them in age groups. We would love to be able to have club days where we can get all the kids down, have a barbecue. If it is raining, they can still come down there rather than staying at home and get, have people talking to them about, health and sports science and all sorts of stuff like that, which we can't currently do. We don't have a spiritual home. We're basically the largest sports club probably in New Zealand that has nowhere where they can call home. We try and work, the schools are good, they try to accommodate us, but with Rototuna Junior High being so busy, we can't have our committee meetings there anymore, so we essentially have them at people's works around the city. It would be great to have a facility we can rent and use as a club, and that's what we're talking about. We're not asking for a free lunch and expect the council to build us a clubhouse that we can call our own. It's for the community to be able to lease off the council, and we would block book it just like we do the peak at the moment. Other parts of the LTP that are unfunded, I think there's a number of sports fields out by Tamarama School. We think those should be undertaken as soon as possible. Our views on that is that with Discovery and Grosvenor being, so busy, and also with Grosvenor actually should be returned back to a park itself, it's not designed to have the number of youth playing there in the weekends and training there during the week. With all the car parks and integrating with the traffic. So we would like to see that other facility built, which would really remove some of the issues we've got at the moment, but longer term we're expected to grow by another 500 to 800 members in the next 10 years, and we've got nowhere for them to go at the moment. Yeah, I suppose that's it. Is there any...
I'm sure there are some questions. Councillor Hamilton? Oh, sorry, Councillor Hamilton, question?
I was just struggling to find your submission, Rob.
So the map has
now.
just been loaded up on Diligent under you'll have to refresh your Diligent. What you said? Yep.
That's right. Just sorry, 'cause I couldn't sort of relate to your submission, Rob. But in terms of what you've said, you put forward a case, obviously. But what, in terms of the sports club, what do you need from council? Is it financial? Is it consenting? Is it support? What do you need to get this thing, your spiritual home?
Look, I mean, I've talked to some of you in the past, and I've certainly, been engaged in the community. And look, I think sports clubs, community groups have to stand on their own 2 feet, and we are a user pay system. So we've become the largest sports club without asking for a lot from anyone, to be fair. But what we rent the fields, as all sports clubs should do, but what we would like to do when you build facilities like Korikori, which is amazing, you need to finish the facility. I mean, you're talking another $3 or $4 million to have it done. I think the ratepayers of the northern suburbs deserve to have these facilities built, because I know you're planning one in Peacocks, which would be well ahead of the population being there. I think Rototuna and Flagstaff deserve this facility to be finished, so the community can use it the way it's intended to be used. We would rent it. We're not asking for a free lunch. We don't want any financial support. What we do want is the amenities and those facilities completed.
And you've talked about you'd partner as a sort of a fundraising drive or help on maybe on some of those funds? Or?
Yeah, so if council said, hey, look, we're happy to put some seed money of $1 million, I mean, then that's the conversation. We can then go raise money for the balance of it and still have it, whether it goes into the Peak Trust itself or however it's structured. We're not wanting it as a Northern United facility per se, but as a community facility that can be used. I mean, we would want to block book it out for this half of the year for winter, through Monday to Friday, and from 3 till 6, but then after that it's for the community to use.
Final question, has there been any plans done up of the facility in terms of the architectural design, or so we've got feasibilities or costs? Or
No.
So So the potential costs are depend on the design and.
Oh, look, I'm being in the property industry. I think you could do something there for $2 to $3 million, to be fair, for that particular building.
Cool. Councillor McPherson.
Thanks, Rob. Just following that line, and I was interested to hear you use the Peak for futsal, I guess, and other bits of training perhaps. But that whole precinct, if you like, up there, it's got the indoor facility at the Peak, it's got the outdoor facilities at Korikori Green, it's going to have another indoor facility at HCS school.
Yep.
Of some size yet to be determined, but with probably a high degree of community use in there. Do you think that the sort of a club rooms, to use a generic term, facility ought to be able to service all of those users? Because there is nothing at the Peak of the nature you're describing either for all the indoor sport users.
Yeah, I think the Peak's talking about building some offices upstairs, which would be great for us and would be helpful. We can use it as committee rooms. I do think other sports clubs would use it for planning and for presentations. But yeah, I mean, the Peak's a great facility, but it should be another 6 courts, to be fair, because it would get used by the community and by sports clubs.
Thanks. I've been trying to convince everyone of that myself. But the point I'm really trying to make is that any club room facility surely that it's a community-wide, you surely should be sort of centralised and usable by all of them. Not you're talking about it down one end of the whole precinct.
I think the reason, if it's there, and the reason that's probably the master plan has put it there, and I do know who those guys who do it, and they're the best in the world at what they do. That's for when you have sports events, if you're having school tournaments, if you're having football tournaments. You know, the administration and the organisers need to be centrally located to those fields, and that's why it's a part of the whole story. It's not an addition.
Okay, you obviously don't get the point. I'm talking about something that is available for users of the indoor centre, which has hundreds of kids also going through it at the same time. But something down that end of is not going to be as usable as something that's in the middle more.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, but I think it would do actually. But yeah, I hear you.
So you want something that's primarily for the outdoor sports?
Yeah, but I still think community groups would use it, and I know there's a lot of community groups who would use a Rototuna hub, and that you could potentially do it a lot cheaper in the middle there, and they could still use that facility because you've got car parks right there that have already been built.
Okay, so we won't go into debate about that, but if you've got another question for clarity.
Yeah, I'd probably, for clarity, I haven't heard about I've heard about the desire for an upstairs at the Peak, but not heard about any plans at all. I've not seen any come through council or the Peak, so where is that coming from?
Oh, I understood that from just talking with the Peak organisers, that there's long-term views of doing that. I'd assume they've got the plans, but maybe not.
Okay, thanks.
I can provide information through the questions.
Thank you. Thank you.
Cool.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for that. Cheers.
Thank you for coming. Next up on the list is Jen, and Simon's with her as well, from the Perry Charitable Trust. Oh, sorry. And you, welcome. Sorry, Sarah.
No worries.
People on the back row are a bit of a blur to me with my new glasses, but you're now very clear.
There's a bit of a presentation we'll run through very quickly in the time. Thanks everyone for hearing us today. Sarah Ulmer is working with us on this project, as Sarah's worked with me on the Te Awa Cycleway for about a decade or so, and many other projects, Podium Lodge and one or two others as well. We're representing the Brian Perry Charitable Trust today, so looking more at the community aspects of Te Awa Lakes. Our Te Awa Lakes team, Lali and Richard, will present separately on the wider precinct. We're very happy to be at the start line of that development, 12 to 1500 sections, and a range of commercial, leisure and tourism activities there on our Northern Gateway. So we're pretty excited to be at the starting point. It's been a 5 or 6 year project in the making. So I don't know, have we got a
Is we got a clicker, Paula, for the...
clicker?
Sorry, I'm
Right.
just running the slides. Just
you're going to run it for us.
Slide whenever you like.
Thanks. Hey, just a quick one for... Thank you, Clicker. I'll just look at you now. I was wondering why he was winking at me.
I take a personal clicker everywhere I go.
The guy at the front keeps winking at me. I thought, oh, I'll talk later.
So just nod when you want.
No problem. Thank you. So, yeah, just a quick one on the Brian Perry Charitable Trust. We've been around now for 45 years. Te Awa Cycleway's been a big one that we've been working on for a decade or so. We support Hamilton City, obviously, the theatre. We've put in a sizable grant. We can't wait for that to open. Hamilton Gardens we support with the Jade Garden and so on. And it's great to have, I guess, what we see as almost a three-pronged attack. We've got the gardens there, which has been a real centrepiece of Hamilton. We've got the theatre precinct in town, and Te Awa Lakes will be our northern recreational leisure and tourism, I guess, hub. So just flicking across, in terms of the concept, and you're probably well familiar with this, it's a gateway, it's a destination, 1,500 homes, potentially up to 1,700 homes, the first stage of which will start this summer. Live, work and play is the theme for that destination, so it's not just about housing, it's about working environments, and it's also about leisure and recreation and lifestyle. Connecting with the river, and we've also done a lot of work with iwi and local hapu in terms of developing the concept, and we will theme it appropriately. So you'll hear more about that from the other team. Today we want to talk more about the leisure aspects of the project, which is on the neighbouring site, and we're hoping to rezone that from deferred industrial into a commercial and tourism precinct. And the three things that we really want to focus on for that area are tourism, aquatics, and we'll talk a bit about aquatics because I know that's a big topic for the city, and leisure and recreation. And we've got, I guess, what we think is a game-changing concept that we want to present to the city, along with some other elements. So as we all know, Hamilton Gardens is a great tourism and community facility for the city. It's an ongoing focus, and I know there's more gardens to come. But we firmly believe, whilst a supporter of that we need something to the north that appeals to our teenagers and appeals to our youth. And also to the, I guess, the society issue we have, which is health and well-being, and in terms of obesity statistics and so on, we know from Sport Waikato's activities in Sport New Zealand that that's a real issue for our community. So it's focusing on those areas, and we need we see this as a partnership approach. It's not something that we can do alone as developers. We have a 12-hectare site, which we could put commercial activities on. It's quite an investment for us, but we want to dedicate that to community and leisure activities. So with that, I'll hand it over to Sarah to run through some of the work that her and Jen have been doing over the last sort of year or two.
Yeah, thanks, Simon. As part of the research for the park, Jen and I did some focus group, worked with some focus groups over lockdown last year, and presented them a storyboard of what concepts the park could incorporate. It was pretty much quite an open canvas, but with some leading pictures. Everyone was presented the same imagery and asked for their opinion on what components the park could take up, and the feedback was actually very, very consistent, and what rated highly out of everyone, about 70 to 80 stakeholders, was that of water activities. And I guess people are looking for activities like these as well, but again, ranked highest were water activities, and particularly moving water. There's a lot of feedback on swimming pools, obviously, but the overwhelming feedback was that of open water, not just an indoor swimming pool, an indoor aquatic centre, but that of outdoor open water where kids can learn to swim in a slightly more realistic environment. Thanks, Clicker. Another thing that came through in the theming and the focus groups was a free community zone, so like a destination playground, but on a significant scale, with like I say again a free accessible playground for everyone. As part of that free community zone, other one, Clicker, was a skate bowl. There's quite a lot of feedback about having somewhere for teenagers, for youth to go, and something for them to do that was really accessible. And a skate bowl was one of those. Interestingly, it's also, funnily enough, in the news last night, the Olympic Committee had taken a giant skateboard around to promote the Olympic Games as part of a new event at the Olympic Games. So we've spoken a little bit about what sort of facility this could host, bearing in mind it is now an Olympic sport as well. So that came up a little bit. Also through the focus group research was biking and hiking facilities, and growing on the huge number of cyclists we saw, people out on bikes over lockdown, an enormous increase in bikes. Funnily enough, literally just talking to the manager of Trek here in New Zealand, Trek internationally are producing 2.5 times more bikes this year than they were this time last year. Incredible increase, and obviously with Te Awa, as Simon mentioned earlier, the river trail along the river from Ngarawahia down to Lake Karapiro, that will go right past this facility here. So what facilities we can provide as part of that, growing on the demand and also the existing facilities in the area. Another part of that free community zone was climbing. Again, a new Olympic sport, and that came through quite strongly in the feedback as well, of having a world-class climbing facility, indoor and outdoor, here in Hamilton. Another thing that came up was a ninja gym. This is growing quite quickly in popularity internationally. An indoor facility modules of which that can be chopped and changed quite often. And far more flexible in terms of user groups than your trampoline parks or standard gyms. A spa, that was another thing that came through. Jen and Simon have been talking to Secret Spot down in Rotorua that have outdoor spas as part of the Redwood Forest, very popular. And it could be an ideal spot where the paintball is currently on that bit of land, amongst the natural environment that's there. A lot of feedback was to keep that area that's already quite a beautiful natural environment, to keep that as it is. And funnily enough, the next most popular feedback was, where can we get a drink in this place? So we are taking consideration to what hospitality we can provide as part of that recreational backdrop. But again, going back to that open water, this came through literally the most strongly out of all the focus groups that we, all the feedback that we had, and people wanting to learn, or wanting their kids to learn in an open water environment that better simulates, what their kids are going to be going into in terms of rivers and lakes and seas, not just swimming pools. Talking about hosting events, a learn to swim program, and just a general recreational environment, and open water. Heated open water, which came back through very strongly as well, through all seasons. And Simon will tell you where that's led to.
Yeah, I've got a bit of a background with swimming, been on the board of Swimming New Zealand, and with Matthew Cooper and a few others on the water safety panel here regionally. And so we've looked at surf parks, we've looked at wake parks and all sorts of variations to that, but where we've arrived at in working with some overseas experts is a crystal lagoon product. And we'll just quickly finish off with a few images of that. But essentially it's a 2-hectare lake, which is essentially a giant swimming pool with beaches. So you think of 2 hectares, that's about 50 water worlds. Yes, 50, is it? 20. They're water worlds 50 by 100 metres, so, sorry, 20 by 100. So it's 20 water worlds. 20 water worlds. In a giant lagoon, crystalline lagoon that can accommodate a number of activities. And if we just keep moving, Mr. Clicker. So that would be on land adjacent to Te Awa Lake. So you can see the left-hand portion of that figure up there. You get a sense of the scale. So we're talking about moving the adventure park across to this zone and having cycling, adventure park, climbing, an indoor precinct, and this lagoon with tourism attached to it, including hospitality. So we're talking about hotels and so forth that would be looking over the lagoon. So it's basically a tourism and leisure product. If we can move to the next one. Here's a close-up of the lagoon. And this is still conceptual, but we have a number of activities accommodated within that. And we won't go through the whole list, but we're talking about facilities for weddings, giant slides, a theatre zone. We've got an aqua park. We've got a small wake park component within it, and of course just swimming. It's a 2.4 metre deep lagoon, so it can accommodate water safety, swim training, all of those elements that are important for our youth in terms of learn to swim and that kind of thing. We move on to one more. it comes in a development phase of 2 or 3 phases, where you start with the lagoon and then add to it as you go over a period of 4 or 5 years. If you click one more, there's a couple more to finish. We'll just show you a couple of images. Just keep scrolling through just to give you a sense of the types of things. So what we're looking at here is a partnership with community trusts, ourselves as the developer, Te Awa Lakes, our co-investor in Te Awa Lakes, and we'd like council to join on board with some funding towards this. We're talking about a probably $20 to $30 million capex project for the lagoon and the adventure elements of the park, excluding the hotels, etc. We believe a submission to the government would help us with some infrastructure around this facility, along with some other key things for Te Awa Lakes. And so we've already met with Paula and just recently, in fact this morning, just to give her a bit more of an outline of where you could help us with this gateway project. Failing that, we'd really be interested in working with you on some sort of funding basis, and we think it could avoid expenditure in other areas of aquatics, such as Waterworld, and take the pressure off Waterworld. So thanks for hearing us. It's a bit of an overview, but from a timing point of view, it's important to get into this process with a long-term plan. And here's the final slide, which talks about a $10 million contribution towards this project, which, as I say, is around 30 million plus the land value, which is probably another 20 to 30 million. So thank you.
Thank you very much for a very clear submission, and and apparently thank you to the clicker also.
Thank you, Mr. Clicker.
I have to say I did see myself in the spa and the hospitality part, and was wondering about the ninja gym, whether it's quite where I'm at, but you never know, we could all progress. Councillor McPherson.
Yeah, thanks very much. I really like the concept, wondering when you can start. The actual question, maybe I was thinking when Sarah was talking about the destination playground, one of the issues with that is hordes of cars to send, taking people there. So I'm interested in your comments and how to integrate that maybe with the Te Awa Cycleway, bus routes, and what's your thinking in that area to avoid having to have acres of car parks?
Yes, we've thought very much about the parking, Councillor. There's a ring road developed around the precinct. If Mr. Clicker might go back, we could just identify that. And the corner site would be a major car park, which would ultimately become an underground car park. So from a bus's point of view, if you go forward one, there's a ring road that comes in and circumnavigates the lagoon, and then heads back out to the roundabout. So that would deal with the traffic. There'd be a car park, which would ultimately be an underground car park, which would have about 1,000 cars. So we've looked at all the car parking ratios for a facility like this, and you're looking at about a car per 2.5 visitors. So this can accommodate 2,500 visitors in a session. But also linking with the cycleway, as you say, which is on the right-hand perimeter. And the idea is that the kids and families can come out on their bikes and visit the park and head back without needing a vehicle. But we will also be looking at public transport with...
I know that the Regional Council has been looking at taking the Comet route all the way out to Hutchinson Road. So would you join with them in designing a sort of a hub?
There'll be a bus facility servicing both Te Awa Lakes and this facility.
Great. And that was a huge part of the feedback too, actually, is making it accessible for youth to get there who don't have cars, through either the cycleway or public transport. So it'll be a huge part of it, and the ability to set it up properly, and its conception would be really important. Absolutely.
Okay, great. Thanks. Thank you.
Councillor Nigel Rofe has a question. She's on Zoom.
Hi, thank you. Oops, sorry. Just with, love it, really ambitious. How do you see the council contribution playing a part in the ownership model? Is it a partnership? Would it be owned by Te Awa Lakes, or how do you see that playing out?
Yes, the lagoon itself would remain in, a separate entity of which Te Awa Lakes would be a shareholder in it or a partner. In terms of the council participation, this would help fund the the free elements of the park, the cycling, some of the lagoon costs, and in terms of what does the city get back out of it, our proposal is that our ratepayers would pay a subsidised cost to use the lagoon. So a normal cost to come in, if you are a member of the public or a tourist, it might be $25 for an adult and $15 for a child. Our proposal is that we would have a ratepayer rate, if the city was contributing to it, that gave those families and individuals perhaps 50% off. So that this is quite a common situation where councils help support public facilities. There'd be a subsidy to the ratepayer.
Got you. And following on from that, with this private, I assume the separate entity, would they be responsible for the ongoing maintenance and things?
Yes, the maintenance would be covered through the entry fees in terms of the lagoon, in terms of that element, but the parks and I guess the free stuff, the bike parks and so on, we need to work out an operating model where we can hopefully manage that through Te Awa Lakes, a combination of Te Awa Lakes, perhaps some community subsidies and perhaps some council contribution. But the idea is to make these facilities as maintenance, to reduce the maintenance cost to as minimum as possible. But as you know, Te Awa Lakes, we've funded that through trusts. It's about a $45 million cycleway now, and the maintenance is relatively low because it's a robust concrete structure compared to other cycleways, and we'd be designing the facilities to minimise, ongoing maintenance costs. But that is a negotiation. Yep.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mayor Paul.
Thank you, Kesh. Deputy Mayor Taylor.
Thank you, Mayor Southgate. Wow, what a sensational vision. I don't think I've seen anything that exciting since the artist's impression on the pedestrian cycle bridge came out, which is just fantastic, of course. A couple of questions. One, you mentioned heated water. So, because obviously the first thing you think about is it year-round? Do you envisage it being a year-round facility?
We do, definitely. And part of the concept is a heated lagoon where you heat up part of the water, but not the whole lagoon.
Yep.
And that is one aspect. We would love to be able to heat the whole lagoon. And in fact, Fonterra have some very hot water right next door, which we could potentially get access to, and we are having some discussions with Fonterra around that. So the aim is to get it heated, but that's just a bit of technical work. And also a dome product, which also runs across the top of part of the lagoon, is something that the owners of this technology are now trialling, and we hope to put a dome in as well. So there's quite a bit of detail that we could add to this.
Wow, okay.
But in 10 minutes we can only just touch on it.
No, sure. Thank you for that. And just the second question, timeframes. I see you mentioned in your submission that, our $6 million dome for the outdoor pull-up water world, this is a superior option there. So in terms of timing, because that's something we're trying to do, I can't remember what year it is, but might be year 3 or 4. What's your timing for this?
We're going for consents on this, Councillor, at the moment, and hope to have those through by the end of this year in terms of this block, and then we would start working on the construction in 2022. Our Te Awa Lakes first stages we'll be working on this summer as well, and hope to have sections available by the end of next year. And we're trying to work this in parallel, so it would be in that late 22, 23 opening the lagoon, and probably early 23.
Wow. Okay, and what year would you want the 10 million? How are you envisaging that in our LTP?
Tomorrow would be great.
Yesterday.
No, we're open to staging that.
Okay.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks, Simon. Thanks,
Thank
Mayor.
you, Councillor. Oh, it's popped up more. Councillor Hamilton.
Thanks. It's probably a quick segue onto that, into the financial aspect, Simon. So with that 10 million that you've sort of flagged, does that have to be grant, or could it be an endowment investment for us with a commercial return? How open are you in terms of that?
Well, our first strategy would be to approach the government and to collectively get some PGF funding that supports this and some of the infrastructure with the roading and so forth. So that's Te Awa Lakes team will talk to that, but that's number one, which would take the pressure off the Hamilton ratepayer. Failing that, we're open to development levies offsets or reallocation of some of your other aquatic budget towards this. And so that would be for your team to weigh up the pros and cons in terms of that.
So I guess to answer the question, you're not really looking for a commercial partner, you're looking for a grant or a contribution.
Yes, I think that's the idea, and then the payback would be in terms of the subsidy to Hamilton ratepayers.
Okay, and just the second part of my question, which you touched on, of the DCs, do you know what sort of quantum they might be, or how we could help them?
Yes, currently they're budgeted around 18,000 a section, so I guess in terms of the main block, that could be around a $20 million DC.
Given that'll be a community, that'll be a different zoning than residential, though, wouldn't it? So it would trigger different DCs.
Yes, but one way of, I guess, offsetting some of those DCs and then Te Awa Lakes effectively investing that into the facility, it's a bit of a roundabout, but that's another way of constructing
right, so
the
not
budget.
DCs directly related to the lagoon build, but more the...
Yes, because Te Awa Lakes will also be contributing as a partner to this.
Okay, and you're open to that potentially instead of, or any combination of how we might...
Yeah, it's a detail that I'll have to refer to Lali and his team to talk to your team about.
Yeah, no, that's cool, thank you.
Yeah, but we're open to different alternatives to put it together on both parties' sides. But I think the government would be the ideal number one step, because they do have money available for community and amenity and I guess infrastructure. Some of the cost is around the roading and ensuring that we've got the ability for the road network to handle big numbers of tourists, etc.
Thank you. Councillor McPherson.
Yeah, just a quick one again, sorry, on operational costs following the opening, things like lifeguards and that, were you expecting council to contribute along the way on that?
No, not at this stage. The operating costs, and this is part of the IP with these lagoons, they're a lot lower than swimming pools. The filtration, the chlorination, the chemicals, they use about 1 to 2% of what you'd use on an equivalent basis at Waterworld.
Yeah.
Lifeguards and so on, yes, you do need some, but again, that would be within the operating model, so there'd be no ratepayer cost.
So it's a capital injection up front we're talking about. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Gallagher.
Look, apologies if I should be totally up to speed. I've gone your map, and the highlighted point in the Waikato District Council zone across the expressway, that's an integral part of the development?
That is a separate process we're going through with Waikato District. As you know, they're going through their plan change, and we expect that to be rezoned residential by around the end of this year or sometime early next year. And we would that would be a stage of the development, which is around 300 or 400 lots and some retirement and that kind of thing. So it is linked in, but it's on the other side of that expressway.
Would that lot relate to all the? I mean, obviously there's access under the bridge, and I'm trying to get a sense of that particular development. How would that relate to the Hamilton City side of the development?
Well, if you zoom back out, it's part of Te Awa Lakes.
Yeah.
And certainly from a resident, it's that piece up the top.
Yeah.
Around 13 hectares, and there will be pedestrian access under the bridge at the riverside.
Yeah.
Lali and the team are working with NZTA to see whether we can actually get under that expressway from a vehicle point of view, because there's a bit of negotiation with NZTA that's still on the table around that expressway going through. So that would be great if we can get vehicular.
Because the inevitable question I'd ask, obviously, is what involvement or contribution in time Waikato District Council might make, in terms of that amenity for that area.
Technically, if you're living on that side, you won't get the ratepayer discount because you're not in Hamilton City.
Okay,
right.
so
no, that's fine. No, that's good. That helps me. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Oh, Councillor Van Oosten, lucky last.
Thank you.
Just another little quick one because we need to move on.
Thanks for your presentation and for the magnificent slideshow that we've seen today. I was part of your consultation through the lockdown, and so it's not entirely new. However, in terms, I know it's very early days, but in terms of the commercial operation and the park paying for itself. I see that you've got the hotel accommodation, paid entry. A lot of the commercial payback that we get from swimming pools, etc., the learn to swims and school entries, etc. Do you have a plan at all for that kind of activity, and have you had a think about what kind of market might be available to you?
Well, we've worked closely with Swimming Waikato, who are doing a lot of learn to swim programs now. They've got some grant funding. They're interested in operating programs in the facility. So our goal would be, with the support of other trusts and our own, to make those programs completely free, and get transport even subsidised to the site. So the goal there is, it is a very central location to a number of schools, including North Waikato, not just Hamilton City. So it's perfectly located from a transport potential perspective to operate learn to swim programs. And those could evolve into utilising the river in terms of currents and that kind of thing. So the aim would to make those as free and affordable as possible, and work with Swimming Waikato and Water Safety New Zealand, who I'm also involved on the regional panel with. So there's a lot of interest, and it's a detail to come, but the idea is to make that a free.
Excellent.
There's also a bit of possibility for sort of compartmentalising the lagoon as well for different uses at different times for learn to swim programs.
Yes, it's big enough to do 3 or 4 activities at the same time.
Yeah.
And still allow the public in at one end, which is 3 water world sort of size. You can run the water safety.
Perfect.
Thank you very much. Thank you, and thank you for all that you do.
Appreciate you giving us extra time.
A lot of extra time. Thanks, everyone.
Okay, I've got Tony next, who's speaking for both items 2.2 and 2.3. So speaking on behalf of Chedworth and also Brymer Heights, correct? And a few more.
So it was 3.1 and 3.2.
Oh, sorry, that was 3.1 and 3.2 that you, as well. So there's 2.2 to 3.2 you're speaking about, yes? The whole group of...
I can run you through it. I think we've got a PowerPoint presentation, hopefully.
That's all actually. So, councillors, you'll have to, you've read the submissions, but you'll talk with them all in the right course. Yeah.
That's right. In the interest of efficiency, I guess, obviously there's a diverse range of submitters there that have a wide range of commercial interests that vary. I can probably run you through a little bit about what they do in case you're not familiar. So Chedworth Properties is primarily a residential land developer, and it's been developing in the city since the 1960s, and is currently Hamilton's biggest greenfields subdivider. We produce about 100 sites a year, and we'll do that for the next 10 plus years at Greenhill Park. Porter Properties, they primarily are involved in industrial land, and have the Porter Farm Park subdivision, which is largely developed out. Empire Corporation is a Porter Properties or Porter company, and it's more looking at future industrial land. There's large investments in land holdings in around Te Rapa North in particular. Brymer Heights is a Porter company, and it's got a residential subdivision in Rotorua of 196 lots. And then TriStar is an industrial land and building developer that's got a number of different holdings throughout the city. Waimana Holdings is a small industrial owner-occupier. And then Mr. Mitchellmore himself, Bill here, has made his own submission. So we're just trying to cover all of those things. There's some commonality, trying for efficiency. You guys got a lot on your plate, so we thought we'd roll it all up as best we could. In terms of who I am, my name's Tony McLaughlin. I provide development services to a lot of these entities. So my day job is really to make these things come to fruition, deliver the product into the market, create the supply really. And so I spend a lot of my time here in council with various parts of it, dragging you all kicking and screaming there so we can satisfy the demand that we have out there for people wanting to come to Hamilton, whether it's to conduct business or to live. And then Mr. Mitchellmore, he is primarily a development contribution consultant, and so he
he knows DCs inside and out. So what we were wanting to cover today is, a range of things from the LTP, growth funding policy and DC. So we'll just sort of, we can work through that. So we've got up there the presentation topics, and then there's some further ones. We'll primarily focus on development contributions, but there is some really important stuff here in this first page. So, consultation is a constant bugbear of the industry. Personally, and I think Bill's the same, we've devoted many years to trying to work with council to come up with, sensible development contribution and growth funding policies. And some of the councillors have been here for a longer period of time. Councillor Pascoe and Mr McPherson and Councillor O'Leary have been involved in those processes. Unfortunately, they've largely been unsuccessful, despite the amount of time we've invested in that. And I guess we continue to be frustrated by the consultation process that goes on with development contributions when it's unloaded in April, at Easter, school holidays, all the things that occur, and then we're left scrambling around trying to fulfil pretty unrealistic timeframes to deal with really complex issues, even though we're pretty familiar with them. And so this is, this happens pretty much every time. So it does create a lot of angst within the industry. And despite, the Property Council seeking to have that consultation period extended by a week, that was declined. And so we don't think that's really that fair and reasonable, given the nature of and the significance of the issues. But anyway, that's covered in most of the submissions, not just ours. In terms of development contributions, as I say, we've been involved for a long time and endeavoured to try and help HCC come up with a fair, equitable and transparent policy that better reflects probably where the Department of Internal Affairs sees it should. And unfortunately, that's been unsuccessful, and a number of parties have chosen to file judicial review proceedings, which are being heard next week. So hopefully that will sort a few things out. And obviously you're welcome to attend that because it's in the High Court in Hamilton. In terms of that, I guess what we've been seeking has never been anything more than something that's fair, equitable and transparent. And it was encouraging for us last year when the DIA released its draft development contributions guideline and DC policy template. And that pretty much said everything that we've been saying for 8 or 9 years. And it bears little resemblance to what HCC do. I guess there's only one thing that we disagree with, and that was the inclusion of indexation. But as I say, that's something that the court will deal with next week. So, in terms of the long-term plan, a number of our the submitters we're representing have back one, sorry, to where we were. We're still working through that. Back to the presentation topics one. In terms of the long-term plan.
A submission and discussing and potentially questioning on a matter that's about to go before the court.
Yeah,
I'm uncomfortable. There are questions I'd perhaps like to ask, but don't feel able to, and I'm wondering whether it's even fair on the submitters.
No, I hear you, and I was going to direct care and caution over the questions, but it's relevant to, I think, to listen to submitters for their point of view. What would you suggest?
So absolutely, they can reference items that are in the plan for consultation and give their views. The extent to which they are arguing points that are getting argued in court, I don't think that's the intent to do that today. So I think it's more reference to what's in the document in front of them, and they're very right to comment on that in that context.
Yep. Yeah, that's the way I see it.
Yeah, that's the way we saw it. We're not looking to...
If in doubt, we won't get into a discussion and we won't get into questions that relate directly to aspects covered off in court next week, but we can talk in generalities. Is that okay?
Absolutely. It's contextual and it's potentially material to your LTP and your policies and all those sort of things, but you've got to carry on business as usual, and we're not looking to... unravel the court process. That's, there's people far cleverer than me dealing with that. So it's more just this is for the DC policy, proposed DC policy really, and some context around it. So the long-term plan, so I guess there's a couple of key things there for these submitters, and that's the need to invest ahead of time in terms of industrial land to support the industrial supply of land. We're quickly heading into a situation of undersupply for industrial, which will be similar to that of housing shortly, the way things are tracking. We don't have a lot of industrial land available for people to buy and develop and own themselves. There's quite a bit out there that you can turn up and lease, but that's not what a big part of the market is about, and certainly not with such low interest rates. So people are certainly preferring to own their own assets and operate their businesses from them. And we have very little left in Hamilton. And so I've been working for some time in opening up some more industrial land in the Te Rapa North industrial area. And a lot of that's boiled down with delays in some of the infrastructure to create the capacity. And in particular, we have the Onion Road realignment to connect to the expressway, which is a $20 million project that's not programmed until 2028 to start. Even though the designation's in place, it opens up significant industrial land that will bring new businesses to Hamilton. We've advanced this on the back of demand from new businesses wanting to come to Hamilton, and we've already lost a few because of the timing issues. And these are all big employers, and without employment, we've got real issues in Hamilton. So all the employment will end up being around the city, not in the city at this rate with the industrial side of things. So we definitely need to advance that from 2028 and bring that forward to basically immediately. It's coupled also with the safety issues at the Ruffle Road rail crossing, which will come before you shortly. That intersection is being identified as being highly unsafe and needing to be closed. And so the Onion Road realignment is necessary to reopen that effectively. So that's a critical piece of roading infrastructure to open up industrial land opportunities, particularly for large-scale employers. If you wanted a 2 hectare plus site in Hamilton now to put a big business on, you would be struggling, and then most of those businesses are having to move outside of the city to either Northgate or to the airport. The other one is the other end of Te Rapa at the Arthur Porter Drive to Kofi Road intersection. Again, this is in the LTP. It's a $6 million project that's not budgeted to start until 2029. Again, there's a lot of industrial land either side of that. If you drove out there, that's pretty much sterilised until that roading project can be dealt with. And it's not that the land needs the road for the access, but it goes through some of that land, and we'll open that area up, and it'll also improve the connectivity of that end of the Arthur Porter Drive to the rest of the city. If the Ruffle Road rail crossing is closed, it'll also have to accept a lot more traffic down Arthur Porter Drive to then cross the railway crossing at Kofi Road East by Duncan and Everett and Toyota and that sort of thing there. So it's going to put a lot more pressure on that area of the city. So there's some significant projects that need to be undertaken. One of the other ones that is really important to us is the budgeting or sufficiently budgeting for the maintenance of vested assets. And one that's particularly prominent at the moment is the maintenance of street landscaping and the problems that are being experienced there. So at Greenhill Park in northeast Hamilton, as the developers, Chibworth Properties invest heavily in the landscaping. It's a medium density subdivision, and part of what makes that medium density subdivisions work is the investment in that shared amenity in the landscaping. Because we've got really small sites there. We've got sites now that are less than 200 square metres, but you wouldn't know that if you drove out there because of the way it's being developed and the way that we've invested in the landscaping to try and soften that. Personally, I think that's probably the big difference between a master plan greenfield subdivision where you're establishing density versus infill where you're trying to retrofit it into an existing environment. We've been able to plan and invest in the landscaping and soften that infill or that density whereas in infill, you don't really get that. It's sort of plonked in the middle of an existing environment and it doesn't have any of that softness around the edges. But what we're finding with HCC staff is they're now telling us that we don't want this landscaping. We can't afford to maintain it. So we build it, we invest in it, we maintain it for 2 years, we hand it over, and they go, well, can't actually afford to maintain this. So we've got a real issue there, and now telling us that we're not going to get approval to plant and invest in the landscaping there. So to us, that's a real frustrating thing. We're really invested in this subdivision, have been for the last 6 years, and we think we've created a great environment. But now we get to that point where we hand it over and nobody wants to take responsibility. So that's, I guess, our long-term plan issues. Nothing to add there. Then the growth funding policy. We see this as an unnecessary impediment to development. And I've had sort of first-hand experience of this when we started Greenhill Park and then worked with Tainui to open up Ruakura. We were an unfunded growth cell that was out of sequence and unnecessary. As time has proven, we're the largest developer of sections in the city, and without Greenhill Park, the city would be even in worse situation than we are in terms of section supply. And the growth funding policy was a massive impediment to us being able to open that up and move it forward and deliver supply into the market. It was used as a tool to dissuade and discourage that happening, and it certainly wasn't about working together to create a private developer agreement that then allowed the risk of delivering and the cost of delivering infrastructure to be shared between council and the developers out there. So my experience with it is all bad, and again, I've been involved in and I continue to be involved in a number of negotiations with council around private developer agreements, and as I say at the beginning, trying to drag council forward to deliver the infrastructure, to deliver the supply into the market for the demand that's there. And it's not worth the paper it's written on. I mean, the consultation document's bigger than the policy itself. It's just unnecessary in our view. So to me, private developer agreements and council partnering with developers, the large developers who have a long-term interest in the city and are willing to invest in it, is the best way forward for the delivery of infrastructure. You then get skin in the game from the developers and they will make it happen, they will deliver supply. With council guessing where the demand's going to come, taking all the risks themselves, making those investments by yourselves, you are hoping that development will turn up there. And so I've advocated for some time now that council working more closely and on a fair and equitable basis with developers will get a far better outcome that'll deliver supply far more quickly. And so we don't need a growth funding policy for that, we just need a change in attitude from council. Development contributions.
Do you want to take some questions on where you've got?
We can do,
already?
yes, yeah,
And then,
happy to.
because
You may not want questions on the DCs.
just bear with us because there's a number of parts in the submission, and it will, and because there are 5 submitters all wrapped up in this, there's an allocation of time that's suitable for that. But I just think if we just pause and take, because I do see some questions up on the board on what you've said so far, keeping them to direct questions, not debate, and just mindful that we are in that judicial review, that you might want to steer your questions to other matters. Councillor Hamilton.
Yeah, thanks for your presentation. Look, I want to ask a naive question, and it's putting aside all your arguments that you've presented for a moment. A lot of we're hearing from developers, the DCs affect the affordability for the end user, but we've also experienced unprecedented growth for land values over the last 2 or 3 years, which proportionally to the DC increase actually leaves potentially much more margin for the developer at the sale point. But the developer will then say, oh, it's the market's determine it, but they've actually got potentially more margin to play with. So, yeah, I'd be interested in your thoughts on that.
That is fair. that's a fair comment, but I think a large part of that problem is driven by the lack of supply. And that's, I think council's a big contributor to the lack of supply. So if there was more supply, you wouldn't have the same price pressures that are forcing up the market price. So, and that's where the struggle is. Of course, if there's a limited supply, the price is going to go up. But the problem we have is we're not able to deliver a lot more supply into the market readily and easily. The time it takes to get the consents, the time it takes to deliver, it's all getting harder and harder. And then when you look at the DCs, and so we've had a big uplift in, say, the price of housing, but that's only happened in the last year. You know, it's gone crazy, I agree. It's just absolutely crazy, the increase in prices. But if you were doing your feasibilities a year ago and said, I'm going to open up a block of land at Rotokauri and the DCs are $63,000 a site, and based on the prices at the time, you wouldn't start. And so it's not something you just turn a tap on like that. It has to take time. And so now the DC's proposed at Rotokauri are $95,000. So that $30,000 increase is going to say, again, they're going to say, why would I start? And Rotokauri in particular has been blighted by the fact that council promoted Rotokauri, we're going to invest here, it's going to happen, and ignored the elephant in the room, which was the cost of the stormwater infrastructure.
Yep. Okay, no, I think you've answered that. Yeah. My other question was, I just want to get clarity around and I understand some of this is put upon us by central government around the swale type stormwater, vegetation pieces that you mentioned. Have you had a direct resistance from staff saying we won't consent? Has there been a struggle there, or are you just getting an indication, or?
No, it's just a far more onerous process. So if I look at the two recent subdivision applications that I got approved last year, one for Greenhill Park, one for Brahma Heights. Greenhill Park was another 450 sections that we consented, and that took 10 months. And so when you get to that, you can say, well, this is what we've done over here, and you're happy, should be happy with that because it's the future. And you come in for a consent, it takes you 10 months to get the next 450 sites, and you're staring down the barrel of missing your construction season. There's some real issues there.
But just specifically, because I'm sure there's other context in there, but specifically to this berm and maintenance issue.
Oh, no, this is a more recent thing. So as part of the handover each stage of subdivision, you have a 2-year maintenance period, and then the responsibility hands from the developer to the council, and so we hand that over. And so what we've been told by council staff is we can't afford to maintain this asset that you're handing over to us following your maintenance period, and therefore when you come to do your landscape design for your future stages, we won't be approving all of this planting and things like that. You'll have to just put it in grass or concrete or whatever.
Okay, which affects the amenity value.
Which affects the amenity value of the subdivision, yeah.
Okay.
So we've done the capital investment up front, and we've maintained it for 2 years, and then it's mature. It's far more. We do the hard work, getting it established, getting it mature, but then it's the ongoing maintenance, which is still a problem.
Thank you.
Councillor Pascoe.
Yeah, thanks, and thanks very much for your presentation, Tony and Bill. Look, I'm just want a bit of a macro view around DCs, and I've got this report that Colin Jones presented to us 2 days ago.
We haven't really got to DCs yet, Rob. Sorry.
Well, I thought you were telling us before that the DCs were too high.
Well, they are, but I mean, yeah, we haven't really covered all of our DC stuff, so we've sort of.
I'll hold that question
We're
over.
at a pause, so yeah, I thought it was probably.
All right, I'll hold that
that's
over,
all I'm
and I'll
suggesting
bring
is
that one forward.
we finish that, but yeah.
The other question that I had is on the growth funding model, and your comments about the need for a change in attitude of council working with developers. Now, we may see it from a different view, but we believe that our staff are pretty active in working to get, subdivisions off the ground, because it's in our interest to do so too. I'm just a little bit concerned that if you're seeing a different attitude to get work underway. And I don't know what the reasons are, but certainly that appears to be an impediment that you've alerted us to.
Yeah. So I do a lot of work, as I say, at the front end of this, and what tends to happen is the lead developer, who I think is absolutely critical in a growth cell or in a big area, tends to be penalised for being the lead developer. Tends to get loaded all of the costs.
No, look, I understand that.
So that is to me counterintuitive to opening up supply. They should be encouraged. They're not looking to get special treatment, but they're looking to pay a fair and equitable cost, and then council needs to carry a fair and equitable cost going forward.
So that really is just an arithmetic issue, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's a matter of
simple
sitting
stuff,
down and saying that the whole development's going to cost this amount. How can we share those costs fairly across?
That's right. Cost divided
all
by
of the developers?
capacity times demand equals what you should be paying for it. Not just because you're first, we're going to try and get more out of you than is fair and equitable, and therefore slow the process, frustrate the process, and discourage the early development.
Okay, thank you. No, that's and I'll hold over my DC question.
One last question on this block, Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor Paula. Thanks for your presentation so far. I can't wait to get to the DC part. Sounds exciting. Just a couple of questions. Part of your narrative was that council is restricting the flow of green sites by our cumbersome way of managing things. I wonder, why is it that currently you're only allowing, say, 100 sections per year in Green Hill Park? Why are you, in that case, only releasing 100 sections each year?
That's a comfortable level for us to develop in a season. So our season, our construction season is 1st of October to the end of April. And so to deliver the earthworks, the civil works in that period, 100 is a comfortable level. We tried to deliver, when we undergrounded the power lines out there, we delivered 154 in one season, and that was, tipped us over the edge.
So it's not about supply and demand and trying to maximise your profit?
No, it's about every year we've always planned to deliver 100 into the market because that's a comfortable level we can develop, and we can consistently do that. And as one developer in the city, that's a pretty big contribution. If there was other growth cells operating at the same level, then there would be much better supply, but we're the only one who's delivering that,
Sure, but I think I heard, am I right, from your own evidence, if you were releasing more sections, the price per section in theory would go down?
No, it wouldn't go down.
Oh, so the supply matrix doesn't work. Supply and demand in that case wouldn't work. The more you supply, the price wouldn't go down. So isn't that counter to what you originally said?
When you've got such a shortage of supply, it'll go up. Okay. But so we've got 8 sections for sale in Hamilton. Then there's a lot of competition, and our waiting list for Green Hill Park is well in excess of what we can supply.
Right.
Okay. So we are doing our bit to supply, and we're doing it, I guess, because we forced our way forward in the sequencing of growth cells. But it's not about if we only had 100 to sell and the market price was 400,000 a site, that's what we'd sell them for, and it may take a bit longer. When we release our next stage for Green Hill Park, it'll be sold in a day. And our price will be the market price, whatever the price the valuers tell us it is for those sections.
Okay.
So,
thank you for that.
So we're just working inside that macro environment, supplying the supply we can.
Sounds terribly profitable. My final question. There's been a lot of narrative around council needing to invest in a significant infrastructure spend to enable either a lead developer or subsequent developers to maximise opportunities. Rotokari's the obvious one with the swale. I'm wondering what your thought would be if we said as a council, actually, we think the developers should just go ahead and set their own pace and do their own infrastructural spend. You do the spend, and I'd be interested in hearing your view on that. So you do the spend, so in theory your DCs would be much less because you're doing the infrastructural spend.
Mm-hmm.
Would you embrace that?
So that is how pretty much Ruakura is structured. So there's a private developer agreement and that's how it's structured. So the infrastructure that Chibworth Properties has delivered at the northern end of the growth cell has all been funded by Chibworth Properties under that private developer agreement. There's been the odd contribution from council for upsized capacity, other bits and pieces, but it's been led and delivered by Chibworth Properties. And at the southern end, it will be led and delivered by Tainua Group Holdings. That growth cell works because there's only two developers and they can do their own thing. It gets a far more difficult, say at Rotorua, where you've got a big swale that most developers need to access for their stormwater discharges, and so there's a lot more parties feeding into it, and they can't develop necessarily in isolation. Okay. So if you look at that, Bryma Heights is an example of one that can, and that's the only reason that we're moving ahead out there with our 196 sites, is because we're building all of the stormwater infrastructure to service that development on the site, and it doesn't need the greenway. So that's the only way it's moving ahead.
We've had a question and answer. Hold that. You may be able to get another go at the end, but I do want to get through the presentation because we are running a little late. Yeah. We can crib back some of that time later, but let's go through the rest of it now. We've had a roundup of questions, and then at the end of your points, we'll have a time for a few more questions.
Cool. Okay.
And we can start with you, Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, that's right. So we can just flick to the next.
And then we can start with you.
Flick to the next slide, that'll be good. So we'll talk about development contributions now. And I guess that there's a number of big picture issues here, and that's around the magnitude of the increase and how, as we sort of touched on in the questions, it makes it very hard to justify the investment in unlocking some of these areas if the numbers don't stack up. And an 87% increase, or up to 87% increase in some areas of greenfields areas is going to discourage development. And 95,000 for a per section in Rotorua is definitely going to discourage development, or even anybody starting to invest in unlocking some of that land. The other thing we're particularly concerned about is, despite the big increase in DCs, there seems to be this massive inequity created between greenfields and infield development, where greenfields has gone up significantly and infield has stayed the same or gone down, which doesn't make a lot of sense to us, and we just doesn't smell right. I know what it costs to do brownfields development, and even just the traffic control alone will sink a project. So I can't see how infields development, there is not an increase of some magnitude there as well if there's such an increase in greenfields. So in terms of the policy itself, we just think we need to get the fundamentals right. We need to look at what the guidance of the DIA is proposing and stop coming up with incentives in the forms of emissions, caps and transitional charges, and just try and get the basics right and come up with a fair and equitable policy. And then from there, we won't have all of this moving around and uncertainty as to what the future looks like. And the long-term investors, the residents of Hamilton who are keen to see the city prosper and have the ability to help it grow, will then be able to invest with confidence, knowing that things aren't going to move around all over the show, and that the investment they made 3 years ago isn't suddenly going to become uneconomic and unviable. So that's what we're looking for there. Bill's going to talk a bit more about the detail of the DC policy because he knows it inside and out.
Yeah. Clicker.
Thank you.
Yeah. Sorry, can we just make a real clear point here, just from I'm really excited to hear from Bill, so I'm not trying to shut you down. Can we just make sure this doesn't cover aspects that are actually covered in the judicial review, Bill? Unfortunately, there's probably a more appropriate hearing space for that, which is underway next week. If we can just keep it focused on those areas that you've identified in the policy, additional to those, it would be appreciated.
that's what I'll attempt to do. Yep.
Okay, thank you, Bill. Appreciate it.
So you can just let us know, Richard, when it gets to something that would be sensitive. I mean, there's always a blurred line, but
Yeah, I'm relying on
we
my
do
staff in
wanna
the back,
keep
and
that-
Bill is more aware of what's in there than I am, so I'll rely on Bill as well.
okay, thank you.
Well, the first point we'd like to raise, and this is really at the heart of the Waimana Holdings submission and why they got quite upset, is the decision of the council, or the proposal by the council, to modify the transport demand factors that are used to assume demand to generate the DCs. In the slide, I've just identified what Hamilton is proposing and the parallels for transport in Auckland and Tauranga. And you can see, even with the proposed changes to the factors, they are considerably higher than the other cornerstone councils in the Golden Triangle. Waimana grabbed hold of that in the context of their submission, and you would have noticed that it was they were aware that their development was not going to create the demand that the council assumes under the policy, and they went through the process of assessing what the extent of the sting was. And it has frankly put them off further development. And that's it in a nutshell. They made their position known at the time the DCs were assessed. The evidence that was provided was rejected by council's own consultants, who then provided a recommendation to retain the current demand factors. Yet a year later, same consultant advising to drop the discount, the conversion factors. Doesn't smell right, and that's the issue of this slide. And the rates are even recommended are still considerably higher than other councils, and that's one of the areas that we would like the council to review what it is doing to see that it is fair and equitable. The next slide, please.
You've got about 5 more minutes, and then we'll allow a short question time too. Sorry.
Did you get the next slide?
Clicker?
Slide.
Oh,
Yeah, sorry.
That's
I was
right.
getting there. We can't quite afford a real electronic one.
Yeah, I'm looking at the example of a cost allocation issue that I was invited by council staff to bring to the attention of members, and it's not that slide. I'm sorry. It's the previous slide on the cost allocation issue. Or is it?
That's the next one. Sorry. No, sorry. Go forward.
That one.
Yeah.
Yep. In essence, what the situation we have here is largely arisen as a consequence of new funding arrangements with between councils and central government, where they are providing growth targeted funding through MB, and perhaps there will be other agencies. And what the developer expectation is that funding should be credited against the cost that council routinely allocates to growth. Under the current arrangement, in the cost allocation methodologies, it is silent on the issue. And the consequence is an obvious double dip. And the example on that slide is intended just to demonstrate how the double dip is occurring. It may not be intended, but it is occurring. We asked to get it fixed, and we were told we had to submit to the council on the issue. It should really be a straightforward fix.
It's one of many, isn't it?
And it's one of, it's not on its own. There's others within the within the allocation methodology that have caused similar concerns. Can we move to the next?
When you're talking about third party, you're talking about NZTA contributions to the build cost of transport infrastructure, are you?
It's any third party, whether it be a developer, government, it does not matter.
No, your sample up there.
Oh, that one there, you can say not NZTA, you can say MB.
Okay.
Provincial growth.
Yeah, I get you.
The
Provincial growth fund.
provincial growth, where it's specifically targeted to growth.
Okay, no, thanks. I understand the point. Yep.
Thank you. So next slide, isn't it? Yep.
Yep, next slide, yeah.
Would you want?
So what we've done here is just some quick fixes that will go a long way to addressing some of the issues there. And so I won't go into detail on them, but, you know, there's this amending the cost allocation methodology to ensure, you know, that we've got open asset access infrastructure allocated to citywide catchments because everybody can benefit from it. Recognising those third-party contributions that Bill just outlined the example for. Stop levying non-residential DCs at subdivision so that we can have more certainty around what is then being built ultimately and the DCs paid then.
I think this is an item that's actually covered, some of that's covered in the judicial review.
Yep, but they're things that you could do easily. Okay, we can, to change things out. Okay, they can read the slides, cool. So I guess the overall summary is we believe council should adopt the DIA guidance on DCs, which will give a far more fair, equitable and proportional, transparent policy. And it's, you know, it's there for all to read and we can circulate it to if you'd like it. So Chris.
Thank you very much. We'll take some questions. Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. I'll try to take the opportunity to expand on some of my questioning earlier on. I understood you to say one of the obstacles to the Rotokauri concept of the developers being responsible for the infrastructural spend was the complexity of multiple property owners.
Yeah, it gets more complex the more owners involved and the need to share infrastructure, whereas the Ruakura example, there was less need. There is a need, there's a commonality through the middle, but either party at either end can then join the dots, yeah.
I guess my question is, why should the general ratepayer and the city carry the risk burden with the complexity of, say, Rotokauri versus the developers who want to set their own pace? I'm really keen on trying to say to developers, yep, go ahead, do it, but you bear the risk. Tell me why we should bear the risk.
That's the role of council is to
bear risk.
To develop common infrastructure for the benefit of the whole city. So there's some infrastructure that developers deliver a huge amount of infrastructure which is vested in the city, but there's common infrastructure they simply can't develop. They don't have the ability to go to an adjoining landowner and say, I need to put stormwater, develop a swale across your property to discharge my stormwater to meet the current environmental standards. Yeah.
But doesn't an SPV enable the special purpose vehicle to do that?
I don't know anything about special purpose vehicles, sorry. Okay, do you comment on that?
The issue with special purpose vehicles is that you've got to get all the landowners lined up to be able to provide an integrated solution. Otherwise, it can't happen. And I think the difficulty that the council, all councils everywhere have got, is that, one of their roles is, and it's an unavoidable role, is that they have to underwrite some of these projects to get them moving, and it's particularly the case if structure plans and etc. are council promoted. It goes hand in hand that if you provide planning, zoning, structure plans.
We build an expectation.
You build an expectation.
Creating an expectation.
And you cannot expect a single developer to bankroll benefit for other owners that may not have any will or desire.
Right. I've got one more quick question on a broader issue. Love the idea of developers investing in infrastructure. Think it's great. I think we've heard that sometimes they do that really well, and then they invest that onto council, and council then maintains it. Council are struggling at times to manage that part. What mechanisms do you think, as an experienced developer, developers could put together to create a mechanism where they have an ongoing obligation to manage that infrastructure long term, rather than it being the asset being moved to council, that the developers take ownership of that as well as invest in the infrastructure? And doesn't an SPV enable that?
Well, developers aren't long-term owners of infrastructure. We develop it to comply with council standards and invest it accordingly. Right. But that's our role. We're not long-term asset owners. Yeah. So that's a different dented model altogether. Yeah.
One short question. Also, it's gone. Rob, you've withdrawn your question. Okay, thank you.
Short. Well done, Rob.
In which case, we thank you both for coming in and talking through that very complex set of issues for us. Appreciated. We are late for a break. We're so sorry to the few people who've arrived spot on time, Leonard and co. We are going to take a 10-minute stretch anyway and crib back some time. So we'll be back at 25 actually, if that's okay. All right, thank you. Welcome back. I'm not sure why you sat down, Leonard, because you're next up. So welcome. Now, you've got a bit of a chunk of time, but if you save time for questions, because I'm sure there will be some, and you've got a number of click-throughs to your submissions, which we, of course, all read, but so you're going to talk to it all in the round, are you, or?
Oh, look, I've got a fairly wide-ranging things to cover very briefly, really.
Okay, brilliant.
So,
thank you.
cool. So, just got the thing up there. Kia ora tātou. I guess on my presentation there, it says Foster's on the corner, and there's a bit of Foster's, but it's probably a bit more of Leonard involved in a number of different things, if I'm to be honest. So Foster's just supports that. If I can go through to the next slide, please. Just a bit of an agenda. The next one. I guess the first thing I wanted to mention was just to say congratulations. I think the long-term priorities, the 5 long-term priorities, are fantastic. And the things, when I read them, I thought, actually, this is something that we being my family as well as my business, can support and want to be a part of contributing towards it. I'll just put a comment there that the long-term priorities are something that, from Foster Construction's perspective, we can align with and we can support, and we'll do our best to try and help you achieve that as a starting point. Before I go into the rest of what I've got here, I just wanted to recognise that actually it's a really challenging regulatory environment you guys operate in, and it's tough. So these are just my views, but I'm keen to engage in conversation with people to, pass thoughts through just to help shape an outcome, as opposed to this is the definitive way of doing things. So I'll just go through some of the things at a high level from our response that I put through. If you go to the next slide, please, which is very, very simple. The creative sector funding, the theatre is so close, and I guess the creative sector funding, when I read that there, for me, is about actually providing a little bit of extra tools to encourage and support. I've committed a huge amount of time to this, getting this theatre across the line, and while this isn't directly related to the theatre, in doing that, I've understood the importance of the creative sector to the Waikato community and to the Hamilton community, and particularly to the wellbeing and how many volunteers there are involved in the process. So this funding for me isn't about paying for people's wages. This is actually providing a little bit of additional funding, which makes the volunteers' job harder, which is a really important part of what community is volunteers working together. And this makes their job a little bit easier with this funding in place, is the way I view it. The next one there, please. The Hamilton CBD, so a bit more specific here. Clearly, I support a lot of initiatives for the Hamilton CBD, and we're an active player in developing that. Where we own a number of properties and are involved in a number of properties around the town. So I fully support the new walking and cycling bridge across the Waikato River. I think this coming to fruition will be a bit of a coming of age for Hamilton City, in terms of actually we're not just a functional city, which is what roads are for cars, we're actually a livable city, which is what this bridge is a message it sends to me when I read this, and I'm very supportive of it. The connection from the CBD to Memorial Park. My only comment, very keen for it to be a community-led project as opposed to just something that goes into the council process. So really keen to ensure you're engaged with the community and community can lead this project. I support the investment in pathways. There's the biking and the walking and the scooters and things. That lead back to the CBD. So it needs to have a hub where it actually all feeds back into. These ones weren't in your submission pack, but I support the endowment fund that's been set up and support that as being a contestable, enabling CBD fund, not a long-term holder of property, but something that can actually spark things to happen. And I'm happy to share with anyone if they want any ideas on how that could work. I've had a few thoughts. I support the strengthening of the urban design panel role in the CBD developments to make sure that the standard of what we do, this next phase of growth that happens through the CBD, is of a high standard, and one that in 20 years' time we're going to be proud of. I also support the incentivising of vertical construction in the CBD, which aligns with the growth aspirations of Hamilton as well. And that's covered in the development contributions policy, but also there's other things that happen that actually incentivise that CBD vertical construction, which obviously I'm talking about going up a number of levels. So the Hamilton CBD, ka pai, let's do what we can to make sure that there's plenty of density, plenty of life and plenty of activity in the CBD. Next one, please. Hamilton Gardens, got another little disclosure there. As a trustee on the Hamilton Gardens Development Trust, First thing I've got there is oppose the building of the new jetty, and I've got nothing against the new jetty going in place. In fact, I'm a big fan of the River Explorer. But I guess in terms of allocation of funding, I'd rather see that $3 million funding go towards the development of the gardens than the completion of the themed gardens in the short to medium term, and then a second jetty can be part of a future plan which isn't in place. I oppose the charging of car parks, like I read in the paper that everyone else has, and that's really around penalising the Hamilton residents who've actually invested into this over a number of years. It's not just the council who's paid for the gardens. There's plenty of families around the place, but also through rates, contributions and things. In saying that, I do support, it wasn't part of your LTP, but I do support charging for theme gardens once they're finished and once the visitors centre is complete for those non-Hamilton residents. And that's the best place to control where that payment comes from, is in the visitors centre there. It is something so unique, and that's why I've been a trustee there for the last, I think, 12 years of this development trust at the gardens, because it is such a unique asset for our city, and I'm keen to see it grow, and it'll be lovely to get to the completion of the theme gardens there. I'm keen to support the continued planned investment there that the council's committed to, in partnership again with the community. So the community's got to keep helping with the funding to get through it, but we just need to keep that thing going so that it actually finishes. The next one, please. Finances. Interesting conversation to talk about. I support the ring fencing of the compliance rate. Probably for me, when I think about finances for the city, I actually think less of the word finance and more about how Hamilton City manages risk, because how it manages risk determines how much the cost of running the city is going to be. So when the central government brings into place compliance that affects how the city manages the city, that costs being ring-fenced, I support, because that's not something that's actually under the control of the Hamilton City Councillors, in my view. So I support the ring-fencing of the compliance rate as it's presented there, as it does create a future conversation. I support long-term debt on intergenerational assets, and no one likes debt. Long-term debt is a tool that needs to be used for a developing community to deliver community infrastructure for future generations, because the benefit sits in a number of times. I suspect the people who paid for the clay pipes to go on the ground 100 years ago that are under Hamilton, sort of, if they'd been able to share the benefit a bit further on and would be able to set this money aside, we wouldn't have the problem we've got now. If the view was actually money needs to be, that was paid for over a generation, and then the next generation paid to contribute towards the next generation and pay it forward a little bit. Unfortunately, with everyone wanting to keep rates down to a sustainable level, which is also a challenging thing, there isn't that money surplus to do that, but it's a change in thinking about how we approach debt and how that actually can enable growth in the right places. I've got there that the Hamilton City Council team is ready and prepared more than most councils that I've seen to take advantage of central government initiatives and to fund community infrastructure. And I think that's a well done from my perspective, and to really encourage you to keep on the front end of when initiatives come up, whether it's from whatever parties in central government. Hamilton City's got the tools and the information to put in quickly ahead of others good information in order to obtain that funding, often at favourable rates, and that should be capitalised on. But there, I support the transferring of the Hamilton Gardens targeted rate, because it is something that's been committed to, so there's not much point separating it off for the future into the general rate. The last thing I've got there is supporting the partnerships to deliver Hamilton City assets. And Hamilton City Council has had a number of people and organisations willing to work together to deliver community infrastructure. A really good example is the Peak out of Rotorua, which I think has been a real success story. In fact, a fantastic success story. I'm currently working with the Hamilton Christian School on their gymnasium because the Peak's been so popular, there's out of space, and I'd love to see that partnerships like that develop up out in Rotorua. How that happens, it's a conversation, it's a corridor around a table, and working out who's the best place to take the risk on delivering these assets and who's best place to take to manage these risks. Rates must be sufficient to cover Hamilton City Council operating costs, including the current contribution to community infrastructure and maintenance and development. That's all I've got on finances. And the fun one that we all enjoy talking about, is development contributions. I totally accept that developers have a role to play in funding city development that we do not directly provide. So obviously developers provide, and we're involved in a number. We provide all the roads, all the underground infrastructure under the developments that we do. And then this vests over to council, and I heard the previous submitter speaking on that. And we should also contribute to growth aspects as well. It's the quantum of what we need to contribute to that. I am aware of there's court proceedings in place for the judicial review, which starts on Monday, as I understand it. And we are supportive of that process going through as Fosters, because we want to see what the outcome is, because there is, in our view, a disparity between what Hamilton City is doing compared to other councils. I've always tried to stay on the sidelines and not get involved, but here I am. And that's the main thing. I do support the retaining the reduction of DCs and charges in the CBD. That will be for a period of time, because there'll become a tipping point where actually it's relevant to put those back in place once there's a bit more momentum within the CBD. I support the 100% remission of DCs for developments over 6 stories, again to incentivise. It's a tool that you've got in your toolkit to incentivise multi-level development, and it's a good thing. I oppose the cap on non-residential DC charges and oppose the phased transition of DC charges, which might seem a little bit counterintuitive, but I oppose those because actually they mask a fundamental issue in terms of the fair and equitable DC assessment, which needs to be resolved. If there was actually a fair and equitable assessment of this, we wouldn't need to put caps in place and we wouldn't need to phase transitions into place. The actual answer would be right in the first place. Let's go to the next slide, please. In terms of development contributions, it's a demand-based model, no problems with that. I guess the issue is that the development contributions should be based on actual demand of what occurs on that site. Probably the collection of when those DCs are collected is an issue. I guess the current application of the DCs on sections creates market uncertainty and distortion, even when we're buying sections around town to develop. You know, I can just understand and work out where to get the information from to understand what the current status of it is. I don't know how anyone else would, because it is so complex in terms of what's in there. And I don't think I'm dumb, but it is complex. And that's probably part of the issue is the complexity that's been created around the development contributions. And I guess part of that is the amount of resources the council's had to commit to this issue, for one. The amount of resources that's been committed from the private community to sort of challenge it is another. You know, there's significant resources that isn't actually productive on both sides of the equation. So really keen to get it resolved. If you go to the next slide, please. We're working, it's very hard to see up there, you've got that on your handouts, no doubt. But just to give you some idea of what I deal with on a daily basis from clients, and I've got the permission from the Christian School to share this. This is the Hamilton Christian School. We're doing their first classroom, which is really exciting for them, with integrated funding. The area is 1,379 square metres, which includes the canopies around the outside of the building. The build cost is $3.2 million to build it, and you'll see the development contribution notice, which came through a week ago for $500,000, including GST, which was, we're expecting something around that $100,000 mark to come through, and it's sort of 5 times what the expectation was. And we need to understand why that is. I haven't had time to go through, but this is the sort of stuff we get hit with on a regular basis, and it consumes a lot of our time going through, journeying with clients to try and find out what is the right outcome in this process. To give you some idea of the 1,379 square metres, how big that is, I did a guesstimation, and the floor area is probably 2.5 times the size of this council chamber in terms of area that's been delivered for these classrooms, and I guess that's the development contribution that goes against it. So it's just trying to find what is equitable in the process. The next one, a little closer to home because it's our personal one, but I thought, why not share that as well? This is the Foster HQ, which hopefully you've seen on Arthurporter Drive, which we're very proud of it. You know, reasonable investment for us in the city on a new office. We bought the entire site. We decided to subdivide off the back part to keep that as parking. We didn't want our cars to park on the roadside, because I know that causes issues too. And basically use it for storage. By subdividing the back of it off, I received a development contributions bill of $190,000 back in 2019. If it was with what the numbers that were included in the LTP, the number is going to be greater than $250,000. We paid $796,000 for the site. So again, yep, need to make a contribution. Doesn't seem proportionate to me, and that's without knowing all the details. So I always just sort of, in the past, just sucked it up and gone with it, but it's got to the point where it's actually out of kilter, and we actually need to resolve some fundamental issues, in my view. So in terms of timing, we had to pay that when we subdivided it. I've got no intention of building on there because it provides car parking for our staff, but we had to pay that $190,000 to get our titles through. So I won't go into all the technical stuff. Those are just some really high-level numbers of actual things I'm working on a regular basis. Cool summary. If I go long, there'll be no questions. Don't worry. Yeah. Look, my summary there. I'm supportive and I'm pleased, and Foster is committed to aligning with the 5 city priorities. Supportive of the initiative taken to develop the CBD, and grateful for that, and I'm going to make sure that we do our part as a company as well. Supportive of completing the themed Hamilton Gardens development as quickly as possible. Again, we'll do all we can to raise funds to help support the cost of delivering that as quickly as possible, and look for the Council's commitment to support that. Acknowledge the challenges of growing city and increasing central government compliance on the finance side of things. Supportive of the long-term debt that enables city future growth and city wellbeing. Oppose the masking of development contribution issues, and support working with the development community to achieve a fair and equitable outcome. And I guess from Foster's perspective, keen to continue to invest into the future and invest in Hamilton and continue creating great community, which is what we do. I do want to acknowledge some of your leadership team from the council, which we do interact with on a regular basis. We've got a very good relationship. It is a really tough job. They do a good job. In fact, they do a job much better than anyone else we deal with in terms of councils around the place, in my view. It's really important that they receive clear leadership from the team around the table here so they can continue to move Hamilton City forward. Thanks.
Number of people on the board. The one question is around the endowment fund as a CBD contestable fund. Given that the endowment fund is for future generations' benefit, how would you see that working in the CBD situation?
Yeah, I guess you've got to understand what future generations' benefit is, and future generations' benefit is from a built environment. It's not from funds or a building, a particular building sitting there into the future, more than likely. So what I've got in mind is that if there's a fund, people can request that that fund contributes to a project which has got a fixed exit process and a value contribution towards it, so it becomes something that enables projects to happen, as opposed to investing into a single building that might spark something or not.
Okay, thank you. And the other question I had was about the charging for the themed for the gardens. You're opposed to the charging for car park, that's clear, and a number of other visitors have also said charging once the visitor centre is done. But I think I heard you also say charge when the themed gardens were completed. Do you mean like the whole of the second phase of? So no charging until absolutely every last garden is built, or can you see charging occurring when the visitor centre is built?
I think once the visitor centre is built, there's still a good value proposition for visitors.
Cool.
Thank
you. I just was making sure I heard correctly.
Yep.
Thanks. Councillor McPherson.
Thanks, Leonard. Just on DC's, a few questions. Could the disparity that you've pointed out between Hamilton and other major growth councils in the area that you've described be because we're closer to charging, making growth pay for growth, and there's less subsidy, cross-subsidy from the rest of the city?
Right. I think it becomes a question, again, a fundamental question about what should be debt funded for future generations versus what should be paid here and now.
Okay. And if we're reaching our debt limit, a debt ratio limit, then that forces you to look at other that's the more upfront. That's the symptom. That's not the core issue. Yeah. That's not the disease, if I can put it that way. So how would you solve that conundrum? How would you suggest we solve it?
Oh, look, it's the challenge that all councils are facing, not unique to Hamilton City.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep. Hey, a couple of questions. You opposed the idea of caps on commercial DCs or a transition to that. Is there not an argument that that's a good way to get buy-in, to have gradual change or limited change rather than going the whole hog, which you've advocated?
What I've advocated is that we find out what the process of the judicial review is, and we actually get to we actually sort out the fundamental issue, as opposed to putting in a whole lot more complexity that even I struggle to understand.
But if that court issue resolves that there's a change in DCs, an upward change of some sort, would you still be opposed to a transition towards that, or would you want us to go straight to it?
Happy to reassess my view on it, yes.
Okay. The last question was about Hamilton Christian School DCs. Are you aware that that 500,000 DC that is being charged for the new building at HCS would not have been charged had the same building being built across the park by Rotorua High School?
No.
Okay. Well, now you are aware. Thanks.
What I'm looking forward to is the $1 million DC charge for the gymnasium, which I'll need to factor into our budget.
Councillor Bunting.
I hope so.
Eileen, first of all, thank you for what you do and what Fosters do. I really appreciate that. But my question is regards the 6 stories. We've had a couple of submitters sort of say, well, look, there's no one really around who could build or could afford to build 6-storey buildings. What's your professional opinion on that, knowing the community we've got right now on the sides of the town?
Yep. Well, we've got 5 that we're building down on the Ibbott site at the moment.
Yeah.
We've got another 3 that we're working on in the city.
I guess they were talking about 6 stories and above, though. They were saying that there's no one that can really afford to build above 6 stories. Would you agree or
disagree?
Okay.
As I say, because we're doing it.
Yeah. Good point. Okay.
Yeah. To be fair, we are probably a little bit more unique than others in terms of the ability to do that.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hamilton.
Thanks, Chair. Councillor Dave sort of asked that other question I was going to ask you around the phasing, because I guess you're testing the fundamental assertions that it's right in the first place. And if it is, well, not charging it straight away, it's sort of offering a more gradated way to get to there, but you've made your point. Same question I asked the previous speaker in terms of equity, and it's not directly DC related, but the property you put up there at 796,000 in 2019, the valuation of that would probably be significant more now. And the argument I put to the other developer was the land value has probably outstripped the rate of the DC. Not that they're necessarily commensurate in terms of their relationship, but from an affordability or delivery point of view from a developer, that's got to surely, the margins actually increase because of the growth of the city and all the infrastructure that arguably the ratepayers are funding.
So the question is,
don't you agree?
How do I phrase this? I guess we're lucky that the values have gone up. Same as a house, a person who owns a house, the values have gone up. For a long time, Hamilton's industrial land was very, very static. But we've just been fortunate, we've caught a growing market, so it does, and again, it does mask it. So that's, I did actually think about that number. So the number out there is about $350 a square metre for that land out there now, which I think values it at about 1.15 from memory. So yes, I've now, by virtue of the fact that property values have increased quite significantly over the last couple of years in the industrial zone because of constrained supply, we have recovered that cost if I was to sell it today, but only just.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Len. We are out of time now, but thank you for, as I say, a really clear submission with the slides. Makes it very easy to digest, so we appreciate that.
Yep. Thank you.
Do we have Jean here? We do. Good afternoon. Just by 2 minutes, Jean.
Oh.
It is, that's how you pronounce your name, Jean?
Sorry?
It is Jean?
Yes.
Thank you. I just hate to continue with bad pronunciation of name. Thank you. Welcome.
Yes, so first I'm very thankful to be here today and to have the opportunity to present my vision for Hamilton. So the general idea of the project is to make Hamilton the city of sustainable innovation, using the strengths of the city, which is this incredible concentration of knowledge, know-how, and energies to solve the problem that we face today. So if we can change the slide, please. Thank you. So the inspiration for this project came from the flourishing literary salon in France until the 19th century that brought together artists, philosophers, thinkers, and writers to rethink the world. And from this meeting came some very interesting and revolutionary ideas, like the encyclopedia created by Rousseau. So the idea of the project, it's exactly the same, is to bring together minds that do not usually cross paths. And so to get an outcome from this meeting of minds, the best solution would be to dedicate an area for experiments. So if we can change the slide. Thank you. So my area of predilection would be Victoria Street in between Hood and Ward Street. And my proposition would be to make a car-free zone and to connect the city center with the river, turning the actual car parks into living spaces available for markets, fairs, festivals, and other community events. And also to reintroduce the wildlife into the city center, to make people more connected with nature. So all those projects and experiments would be done in close collaboration with designers who works with innovative and experimental ideas. And if we can change the slide. So this is what Victoria Street could look like. So some nicer terraces for cafes, welcoming street furniture, and more nature everywhere. And to give you a more precise example of what would be the idea, so we could think, for example, inviting artists and designers to rethink the pergolas in Victoria Street with innovative materials. So, and to go further in this idea, I wanted just to show you very quickly an example. So if we can change the slide. So we could use for that mycelium, which is the vegetative part of the mushroom. And it's a very interesting and innovative material because it's very durable and it's highly resistant to mold, fire, and water. So, and this is the Dutch design pavilion in 2019, and the name is the Growing Pavilion, and it's, so they used mycelium on the walls. So to get there, we need to attract people from all over New Zealand, but also, yeah, no, it's not yet, from all over New Zealand, but also even further. And to do that, we need a space where we can bring all those ideas together and give them life. A structure between a maker space, a meeting space, a workshop, and an artist residency. And so my idea, so if we can change the slide, my proposition would be to build a kind of observatory in away from the world and from the bustling city, a very unique structure made as a piece of art. So 5 minutes is very short to to present the project in this globality, but this just give you an idea of of it, and I hope that we'll be able to cover that.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for bringing that creativity of spirit into council. There's a lot to like in those slides. So what you're asking for is for council to support some kind of collaboration based around that model to help regenerate and revitalise that stretch of the CBD. Is that what the request is?
So all the project is about collaboration, and yeah, it will be amazing if we can collaborate around some of these ideas. But more than that, I need validation to be sure that I can what I can do or what I can't do, and so after that I can start to meet people and to see what.
Thank you, Councillor Bunting.
Bonjour, merci pour la présentation. That's all I got. I've been practicing.
Oh, we were about to be truly impressed.
But have you talked with our staff about these ideas? And I'm thinking in particular with regards to our innovating streets ideas that are coming up, not quite as elaborate as this, but along the same thinking. Have you been in touch with our staff?
So so it's the very beginning of the project, and it evolved so much during the time. So my first idea was much more an art project.
Yes.
So it's still very arty because it's my background, but so yes, I've met a few people from the council in the art sector.
Yeah, no, we've got some excellent staff in the urban design team as well, and perhaps that might be an idea
if you have any suggestion, I would love to meet them. To see.
I'll take that offline.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you for your presentation and sharing with us these ideas. The pedestrianisation of Victoria Street, what kind of time frame are you thinking of, and how do you think you might be able to, I mean, we might be able to bring businesses along with us on that journey to kind of make sure that everyone feels like, you know, they're heard and concerns are properly thought about, you know, around parking and stuff like that.
So I'm much more the person who brings the idea. I need to just check with specialists to see, but it's a long project. It's
but have you seen something like this done elsewhere?
Sorry?
Have you seen something like this done elsewhere that you're kind of basing this off, or have seen been successful? The pedestrian, the closing off of Victoria Street there to cars.
So the good point is that just the closing could be done very, very quickly. I just think about, I used to live in Avignon in France, and each year there is a festival, a theatre festival, which is quite an amazing festival, and they close all the city, so the cars just can't come in, and they just put just stop the car to come in, and they do that for 3 weeks.
So thank you. We're kind of out of time, and you're right, it's a very short period of time, but I see those councillors are interested in approaching you for some additional time with you to explore those concepts. Is that okay? So we have your details. I guess we can get in contact with you. And
of course, with pleasure. Yeah.
Okay. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Next submitter with Margaret. And just to be pure about these things, I'll register my conflict of interest in the next submitter because she is my mother. There you go. But my mother with her mind of her own and her ideas of her own pertaining to Hamilton East. So I won't enter into any questioning, just to acknowledge that this is my mum.
Yeah, and most of you have seen me before anyway. Look, it won't even take 4 minutes. I've just picked up on one of the lines in my submission. So I'm actually here on behalf of the Hamilton East community who want to put forward their request for the provision of space within Steel Park. Steel Park, as you probably realise, was designated a sports ground some years ago. So that resulted in the community not having any playground equipment suitable for youngsters and teenagers put back into Steel Park. So I know there's a little one in the corner by the ice cream shop, that's fine, but there's nothing for like youngsters and teenagers. So the space the community wants would be for a 3x3 basketball court to benefit these local youngsters and teenagers. It would allow them to have fun and casual play, but also give them the opportunity to organise teams for basketball sporting competitions. Basketball is a fast-growing sport in New Zealand and would be popular for the families living in the area surrounding Steel Park and in its fast-growing infill housing. We've had contact with Waikato Basketball Association and they have given very much helpful advice, information and encouragement. They also gave the Hamilton East community contacts for things like costs and technical stuff for an outdoor 3x3 basketball court. The Hamilton East community has already started fundraising, but in a very small way. But what we would appreciate knowing is if the Hamilton City Council would provide the space within Steel Park for what could be this new and exciting sporting venue in Hamilton East. Knowledge of this would allow the Hamilton East community to pick up speed with its fundraising and supporters. Not that we would say no to any funding that you might like to give. That would be appreciated. So as you see, I timed it at home, 2 minutes, I'm nearly there. So I'm not sure if you've got any questions for me, but that's what it's all about, the basketball court for Steel Park.
Thank you. Councillor Bunting.
Thank you, and I'll be quick. Thank you for your persistence in this matter, Margaret. I appreciate that. So at this point, you're looking just for some space. Funding's an extra issue.
Yes.
Do you have an idea of whereabouts in Steel Park that 3x3 would go?
Well, we've thought somewhere near the pavilion, because I think I'm not sure where that's at, but the pavilion is going to be like rebuilt or.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so we thought near there, because also it would be near the facilities and things like that.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Because there might be youngsters in there. If it was put over the far corner, then they're not near the facilities for the youngsters.
Yeah, I understand. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gallagher.
Can you give me an idea the Hamilton East Community Group is currently
Well, yes, it's in a state of flux at the moment, and it's moving from the Hamilton East Community Trust, and there's negotiations going on with the Business Association.
Right.
So I think Chris Rollett came.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he's moving from the old community trust onto this new, which we're getting up and running.
Do you have any, does the new group have any visuality of the Hamilton East plan, which was published by this council some years ago?
I couldn't say
No,
on,
no, it's
on that?
you know, like, because that, obviously I'm interested in, we've
Yeah.
done historically some work there,
Yeah.
but certainly
Yeah.
will.
I will take that back to them.
No, because there's going to be some post-discussion on that
Oh,
particular
okay.
document. No, thank you.
Thank you. No further questions. Thank you.
Thank you all.
We have Nikki Lee is here. Nikki Lee. Welcome.
Kia ora.
Kia ora.
Ngā mihi nui kia koutou katoa. I'd like to start with a karakia, if I may. Whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga. Kia mai kina kina ki uta, kia ma taratara ki tai. E he ake ana te atakura, he tio, he huka, he hauhu, ti hei mauri ora. Kia ora, so my name's Nikki Lee Heta, and thank you for allowing me this time to speak today. My kōrero today is based around community centres and lack of funding, and also the need for more funding for our communities to support particularly our Māori whānaus who are really struggling at this time. We've got 700 families that are in emergency housing. There's about 40% of Māori who are in unemployed. And within these emergency houses, our Māori whānaus that are in there, they create a community context with the other whānaus that are also in there with their children, but yet when they go into housing, there's not that same community bond when they're out in their houses, and that's quite a struggle for a lot of families because they need that support. You know, the funding that's available for these community centres that are out there is not enough. When you break it down, and it's only equates to like $7,000 a week per community house of the 9 houses that are in the city, and that's not enough when you've got hundreds of families that are coming to you weekly wanting help with food and counselling and budgeting advice and things like that. And so it's like really drawing attention to what are needs on that level. I lived on Martin Road for 10 years from 2000 to 2010. I went away for 10 years and I came back and the poverty is still there and it's still very real. But when I look around at the bigger aspect of our city, it's growing in every other area. But when I go back to that area, it's still in poverty. And that worries me because we can do better as a city. We could look to Hamilton City Council as being their partners with these poorer communities and helping them. It's very hard for a community to feel like they want to do better for themselves when they're stuck in the same environment. It just doesn't work. But then you can go into other areas where, you know, they've got nicer playgrounds, nicer roading, housing's nicer and all this stuff, and there's more funding that's been put towards those new developments, which is understandably, but then you look back at these poorer regions and they're still stuck in poverty and it's still poor and it's still very depressing and the families and the lifestyles that there are still very broken. And that's something that I believe that our council can really prioritise, and I really hope that it is a priority with the next 10-year plan to put more funding towards this and really help support these community houses to provide, you know, counselling and education and really supporting these wraparound services for these families that are in need, because it's not going to go away, and if anything it's just going to get worse. And so that's what my kōrero is about today, but it's nice and short and brief, so if you have any questions.
No, thank you for that. So I see in your written submission you talk about Te Papanui with having under 400,000 in funds. Is that all the houses? I couldn't.
That's what I had thought initially. So I was actually approached by some of the workers at the centre and asked to make a submission. I think it was a day before the deadline of submissions, and it was about 9 o'clock at night. So when I went back and I read my submission, I was like, that's really sloppy. So excuse that, because the figures that I did include there are wrong. It was around 400,000 per community house. But even when I broke that down, if you spread 400,000 off per community house and break that down to 52 weeks, it only equates to $7,000 a week. And that's really not enough.
So your key theme is that as a part of supporting people, especially in, as you say, we've got 3 lower socioeconomic areas in Hamilton, shamefully, but in those areas, more money into the community houses would pay back to the people and enrich the people to get up on their lives.
Yeah, well, these community houses have got really, really good big visions for their communities because they see what the need is, they hear the people on the ground level, and when you have forums like this, those aren't the type of people that are going to write submissions. They're not the ones that are going to come along, so their voice isn't really heard. And the only people that hear their voices are the ones at the community houses. And so these community houses are just asking for funding to like make better playgrounds and make safer streets by including speed bumps along their streets, growing community gardens, having access to education and counselling and all that kind of stuff. And it's just not there, and it's just
so
too
it's
hard.
resource at that local level that we need. Yeah. Okay, I'm sure some of the councillors will probably want to talk to you afterwards because we've only got limited time, but I've got a couple of questions. Councillor Gallagher and then...
Actually, look, I'm acknowledging that Councillor McPherson is a life member of the Western Community Association, and he's got some clear questions. I guess in terms of rates, funding, which is a property tax, versus, income tax and shared funding. I was not passing the buck. Do you have any views as to partnerships that we should be seeking with central government agencies? I'm looking at various sources of funding. Totally accept what you say.
Yeah, and I do look at from a government level that the government itself can be doing more, but whether that gets to where it needs, I feel like as a council we can prioritise that ourselves. I know that governments prioritise that as well, and that there is funding available that way, but just from a council level, because the need's right there and the need's right now.
Okay, thank you.
No, thank you.
And a question from Councillor McPherson.
Yeah, thanks very much for your very eloquent speech in favour. It was excellent. Firstly, just a correction. I'm certain we give nowhere near 400,000 average per community centre. It might be that for the whole lot. So it's worse than.
So it's even worse.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. So but my question relates to actually something you put in your written submission, where you opposed charging for commuter parking, which was the money from which was going to go towards improving public transport to all areas of the city, including areas like yours, Enderley. What do you think that free parking should be provided? When the opposite point that's put here as one of council's preferred positions is to actually use that funding money, charges from that to fund public transport, which is more beneficial presumably in a lower decile area.
Yeah, I do see where you're coming from. I guess the way I look at it is funds are when you're living in poverty, your funds are already limited. So having more limitations out there isn't going to help your situation at all. So I'm not saying that everything should be free. Obviously, that's not going to work. But that's sort of why I tick that box.
Okay. Would you put it a different way then? Would you improve public transport in your area? Would that help? Would that be one of the things that might help?
To be honest, I believe that the public transport system is actually really quite good. The amount of bus services that they have, the times that they run and the locations that they run are quite well. So, and that runs all through those areas, which is good because a lot of people in those areas need that. So that wouldn't really, for me, I wouldn't look at that that needs to be sort of a priority in those areas.
Yeah, sure. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much, and we appreciate, as you said, coming to this late, but still giving us a very useful submission.
Thank you.
Much appreciated.
Kia ora.
Next on the list is John, maybe? No, John's not here, so we're having Marilyn next. I don't think I have Natasha here either, do I? No. Marilyn Yeoman, number 6.1.
Kia ora iho mā. I am representing the Garden History Research Foundation, and I apologise for our president, Dr. James Beattie, who's not here today because he's in Dunedin. Our aim is to promote a wider and more extensive understanding of gardens in their social and historic context. We regard Hamilton Gardens as a museum of garden designs through the ages as interpreted through various cultures. This is the unique feature of Hamilton Gardens, and it is not replicated in the world, hence our worldwide award. We urge you to view our website. Needless to say, our submission relates to how the proposed plan will affect Hamilton Gardens. We recognise the Council's need for money and the myriad demands placed upon Council, all competing for the few dollars available. However, the Garden Research History Foundation believes that the completing of the enclosed gardens as soon as possible and upgrading the visitor centre would enable the City Council to charge for entry to the enclosed area. I think this is a bit of a continued comment from people here. This should net more income to council as it's an investment that the council cannot afford to ignore. In regard to the targeted rate, Ewan, we recognise that the amount of money that's been earmarked for the gardens in the future, but our problem with this is we do not know the timing, the dissemination or the direction of this funding. Once completion of the enclosed gardens is delayed, it will be much harder to revitalise interest. We are all for charging buses. We are absolutely not in favour of car park charges for the following reasons. The children's playground is very popular with parents and children. Will they be able to afford parking fees? People often combine gardens visit with a visit to the cafe. Will they still support it? The gardens are presently open to all from any race or socio-economic group, and you just have to be on the desk at the information centre to see the variety of people and their families that come into the gardens. Parking charges will deter many of our needy city population that want a city where they can participate and thrive. There are a number of funerals, weddings, celebrations, etc. held in the pavilion. Would the guests have to pay? A number of groups and associations meet regularly in the meeting rooms. Will they be expected to pay? What about the Friends volunteers who work at the information centre? Will they be expected to pay? And the gardeners also. We are in favour of gully restoration, as this encourages interest in things historical and possibly revisiting early gardens. We are totally against funding for another jetty. This is the third proposal for a jetty, and in the booklet it actually had a picture of the jetty, proposed jetty, coming to the Italian garden. And this was a previous suggestion when the Friends were going to put an AV room at the bottom of the Italian garden. I believe now it's going to go down to the Rose Garden, but we would like to see that money put into the enclosed gardens instead, and if there's a problem with the present jetty, let's get that sorted. And we are in favour of pursuing yet more themed gardens in the future. And I have with me Gail Pittaway, who's also on the Friends, on the Research Foundation.
Kia ora, everybody. Did you want to add something, Gail, or you're just here to support?
So I worked with Marilyn on the submission, and we had a recent meeting of our committee and presented our proposals, and they were fully endorsed by our committee. So we're very much operating as a team.
Thank you so much. Councillor Bunting has a question for you.
Hello, everyone, well, thank you for your great work you're doing. It's nice to see you again. Regards your comment about not knowing the, where the money's going, etc., is there any way that we could make that easier, or anyone we could put you in touch with who could give you some assurance?
Yes, that would be good.
Okay.
We would appreciate that.
Yeah, okay, cool. All right, because I believe that the quantum isn't affected, or if anything, it's more in your favour. Yeah, so I'll...
Yes,
yeah,
we just want to know in which direction it's going.
Yeah, of course, and look, we've got excellent stuff.
Can I just clarify that we are a research funding committee who our priority is really to support people who are investigating the history of the gardens.
Oh, I see.
And we raise funds for scholarships and things like that, but we're very, very closely allied to the Friends of the Gardens, and of course that is their, their need is to know about the developments.
Okay, well, look, I'll make a note of that.
As well.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. There are no further questions, but it won't surprise you to know, as you were here yesterday as well, Marilyn, that there have been a number of submissions on that. So we're very familiar. Thank you for taking the time. We appreciate it. And,
okay, thank you.
We apologise for running a little late. Now we have our friends from the Waikato Food Inc. welcome. Hi, Vicky. Did you want to come up as well? No? Oh. Okay.
She didn't sign up for that. Firstly, I'd like to start off by thanking Hamilton City Council, who last year generously gave Waikato Food Inc. $40,000 in funding. This was massive for us as it meant we could hire a full-time events and project manager, and this resulted in us also being able to secure much-needed corporate sponsorship. While very grateful for this funding, the fact remains that we need to generate $250,000 a year to run Waikato Food Inc. and really make an impact. We in no way expect Hamilton City Council to fully fund Waikato Food Inc. What we do hope for is your ongoing support in what we do and our vision for the city. And this is a vision that perfectly aligns with your long-term plan. Sarah Meikle from Wellington on a Plate points out that the 130,000 people who participate in Visa on Wellington on a Plate, only 30% of these are from out of town. Sarah says, first and foremost, the festival has been designed for Wellingtonians. It was recognised early on by council supporters that cities that are a great place to visit must be a great place to live and work. And a thriving hospitality sector is a significant contributor to workforce happiness and retention. This has been the ethos behind Waikato Food Inc. from the very start. And while we see benefits of events like Feast Waikato, our real focus and goal behind our work is to build pride in our region, of which Hamilton is the beating heart. Before Visa Wellington on a Plate, Wellington was not known as a foodie city. Now it is touted as the food capital of New Zealand, and it is where all the cool brewers, chocolate makers, peanut butter and other producers choose to start up. Hamilton makes more sense for a food business to be based. We have the space, lower rents and great access to key markets. We just lack that hip reputation. Let's do something about that. Investing in Waikato Food Inc. is a great move. Look what we've done with no funding in the past 6 years. Imagine what we could do with sustainable funding, allowing us to move from a volunteer base to employees with real KPIs. Collaboration and community don't just happen. They require people with vision, drive and resilience, and the Waikato Food Inc. team have this in spades. A good example of this is the Waikato Food Inc. Awards held last year. We were partnering with the Restaurant Association on the Waikato Hospitality Awards to only be told they were cancelling them the day the awards were to be launched. Never once to take no for an answer, and believing these awards were essential to our industry, especially after such a huge year, we used the P word and we put on a party and our awards, and we did this in 6 weeks. This proved we could rally the community together, we had kudos amongst possible sponsors, and we could get the job done. It's also just one example of how we are celebrating and highlighting our region's talent. Building a buzz is essential, and this means not just creating events, but telling our stories. Currently, there are a few avenues for this to happen. So last year, we launched our new website, which is now the hub of great local food stories, and we're working with other media outlets to generate and inspire more stories. We have put the city on the map with our culinary challenges like the Matariki Dish Challenge and Mount Challenge. These challenges connect local producers with chefs and eateries, as well as engaging the public. Other regions are now using these as templates, wanting to replicate what we already do. Who knew Matariki was the next big thing 7 years ago? We did. And this is a perfect example of how food connects, educates, and builds pride. And in this case, this is pride in what is uniquely ours, our culture, as well as our culinary offering. A vibrant food scene can exist in a city without cultural or creative happenings, but no city has a thriving cultural and creative scene without an accompanying food scene. By proportion, hospitality businesses contribute more to the local economy in terms of employment and use of local producers and suppliers than arguably any other industry. Waikato Food Inc.'s approach is collaborative, with a desire to build and strengthen relationships with others working on creating our amazing city, from Hamilton Gardens team to the Garden Arts Festival, Creative Waikato to Kaivolution. Finally, we see our role as not just celebrating and highlighting our food scene, but in building it. We have our Producers Collective, which aims in helping producers, both big and small, to learn from each other. We've also identified our industry as overrepresented in mental health statistics, and we're working in a collaborative and supportive program to provide resources and support for our industry leaders. In the past year, every region in New Zealand has been discussing their food strategy, and the result has been an endorsement of what Waikato Food Inc. do, with other cities replicating many of our activities. When I last stood here, I pointed out that every city in the world and New Zealand you recognise as having a vibrant food scene has a council that more often than not initiates the type of activities we do, or at least they fund and support them. We urge Hamilton City Council not to take Waikato Food Inc., our vision, our achievements and our potential for granted, because we cannot continue indefinitely without sustainable funding and support from our city leaders. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Bunting.
Thank you. Hi, Vicky.
Hi.
Great. Thanks for what you're doing, and thanks for the invites to all those events too, which is cool. Need to ask you a couple of tricky-ish questions, if I could. I noticed you called Waikato Food Inc., and each time I've been to these things, the suppliers are from around the area. How are the other councils who are also benefiting from that branding and your work doing?
So we have been making submissions to every, I mean, obviously you know how our region makes up with lots of different councils. It makes it quite hard.
Yeah, of course.
The general feeling is obviously they lead with you guys taking the lead, and that has helped us get our foot in the door with other councils.
So are they funding you? Or
well, we're still in the same sort of process, the long-term plans and with other councils.
Okay.
We're also just getting into the streams of when they do funding for events and things like that. So far, our Waipaha District Council was quite supportive with Feast Waikato events and things like that.
Yep.
So it is really just about, we start from the centre, which is Hamilton, and are trying to work our way further out.
Yep.
But that comes to capacity as well.
Cool, because I'm just trying to keep it relative, and I appreciate that a lot of your supporters are businesses who will benefit out of this. So membership from them, how are they contributing to this?
So we're a not-for-profit trust. So in our thing, we have to be a membership-based organisation, and and that's great. But that's never going to it's never going to fund us, that membership base. Obviously, more engagement.
I mean, could you up the membership a bit?
Oh, we're definitely up the membership, and our membership has grown every year. But it's not. But really, what we do is beyond just a membership thing, because it is a collaborative sort of approach. That's definitely a key part of what we do, Mark. And the more we do, the more that membership grows. But the more it's a bit of a chicken and egg sort of situation. But I guess what we're saying is you can't just look at Waikato Food Inc. and say we represent businesses, so that it shouldn't be. What we do is fill that gap between business and community, and if you didn't have that, then you lack those sorts of things. It's just like you fund creative industries and...
Yeah, well, and I guess, last question to me, Paul, I guess that's what I'm trying to get at, where, where I'm trying to get $100,000 a year over the line for the entire creative sector, and you're asking for 3/4 of that for the food sector. And you're funded by, your members are businesses. So I'm just wondering if you are sweating that asset hard enough, I guess, on behalf of the rate.
Yeah, I agree. But I mean, most creative industries, the artists are businesses in their own. We actually represent more people, and the hospitality industry thus employs more people in your city than the creative industry does. It supports more other businesses just because of the type of that a creative industry does. So if you were going to say how your money, I'm not saying I want to take one from the other, because I think that they're both are contributing. But if you were looking at what an economic impact of supporting the hospitality business, you're actually impacting more Hamiltonians than you would by giving that $100,000 to a creative industry. How many actual people does that, and families does that support compared to the food and hospitality industry?
Thank you. Thanks, me, Paula.
Thank you. No further questions.
Thank you.
Thank you, but thank you. No further questions. Thank you very much for a presentation that was very clear and set out very well, so we appreciate. And the recent events that you've run have been awesome, so thank you for that. I've been lucky enough to be able to go to a couple. Just looking at my list. Niall, did I say that right? Yes. Oh, excellent. had a 50-50 toss-up in my mind whether I was going with Neil or Niall, and it looked like Niall to me, so brilliant, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Southgate, and good afternoon, councillors. And thank you for the opportunity to present to you in this hearing this afternoon. So I'm presenting to you today excuse me, as a resident and a ratepayer of Hamilton. I actually work for another council in a policy role, preparing LTPs, so I'm quite familiar with them and the challenges that councils face in terms of funding and so on. I would just commend the council on the consultation that's been undertaken and the range of advertising activity that's been done across the city to promote the consultation process and to really engage with the community on it. Overall, I'm really supportive of the direction of travel that's set out in the LTP and the consultation document, and there's some really exciting projects that have been put forward that will really bring a positive benefit to the city. So I just wanted to speak briefly on a couple of matters in the consultation document. The first one is around the provision of additional walkways and cycleways around the city, and I fully support that intention. I would just perhaps caution that I'm not sure of the detail around those plans, and if the intention is to remove existing vehicle lanes or car lanes to replace them with cycleways, that can obviously be quite difficult and can result in more congestion than otherwise would be. But there are a lot of instances around the city where there's wider footpaths being put in place and shared walkways and cycleways and the green dotted line along the road shoulder, and would fully support further rollout and development of that. I also see there are areas where I think there is some investment in additional walkways and cycleways could be really beneficial. One example is the link from Victoria Street over to the Claudelands Event Centre. There's no clear walkway or even cycleway across that space. You need to kind of drop down into River Road and kind of walk either around Tiaraha Street or O'Neill Street in order to get over to the event centre. So I don't know how easy that would be to fix. Obviously there's a rail corridor running through part of that space. But some better access across between the event centre and the city would be good. So associated with walkways and cycleways, I fully support the intention or the plan to contribute to the construction of a new bridge across the river. I think that's an excellent idea in terms of improving that accessibility from the eastern side of the city into the CBD. Potentially, a bridge like that could become quite a focal point for the city and develop some iconic status. The second issue I just wanted to raise today is around charging for commuter car parking within the fringe of the CBD area. I actually work out of town, so this doesn't directly affect me, and so it's not something that I can comment on in that way. And I understand the intention around it to try and encourage that behavioural shift and that modal shift in our transport behaviour. But I think this will negatively affect commuters that are coming into the city. Not everyone has access to the public bus service in terms of people who are starting earlier in the day or those that come from out of town areas. And I also feel it will also displace parking further into those residential areas. And potentially it'll start to impact on the kind of amenity and the look and feel of those residential spaces that are on the fringe of our city. Turning to the other issue around parking, obviously I understand through this hearing you've had a number of submitters talk about the proposal for the Hamilton Gardens car parking. I don't support that. I think there are a number of reasons why people come to use the Hamilton Gardens car park, not only to access the gardens themselves, but to use the playgrounds, the picnic areas, the cafe, the river jetty. I, for example, have parked there and used it as an access point to get on the river trails and things like that. So I think there's some other ways that we can contribute to the further development of the gardens that would be an alternative to having parking charges there. And just briefly, just picking up on two other proposals that are in the LTP. One is around the demolition of Founders Theatre. I understand the council's had some proposals from a community group to you repurpose Founders Theatre, so I'd support exploring fully that proposal rather than its demolition. And in a similar vein, I see the council's put forward $1 million in its budget for the muni pools. So I'd encourage the council to work with the Sink or Swim around that. Yeah, and thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Thank you for coming in. Any questions? Councillor Thompson.
At least in the meantime, until we have something, I guess, even more fit for purpose in place, getting people, you mentioned walking from town to Claudelands, it's not totally clear where you go. We're actually looking at putting in a formal crossing across River Road, which will help make that safer. But then beyond that, do you think some clearer signage and things, like postage saying, hey, look, this is the way to Claudelands would help?
Oh,
what else could be a quick win to help people to know where to go?
Absolutely, some signage would be a great first start and just helping that wayfinding.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. A couple of further questions, Councillor Gallagher and then Councillor Pascoe.
Yeah, thank you. Your observations with regard to the Heritage Founders Theatre is certainly noted. You're a resident of Hamilton, if I got this right, but you work for another territorial authority outside the city. So I guess I'm going to get your perspective as an individual around the issue of people from outside the city who have a community of interest but use our facilities but don't necessarily pay. And the car parking thing is of interest, one, a la the Hamilton Garden. Do you see a potential use in future for a Hamilton card where somehow we actually target people who live here to at least get some discount? I mean, it's just a matter of we do, inevitably.
Yeah, I think that's an area that could be explored. I know some other councils do that, for example, with the library card or resident discounts for various facilities like pools and things like that, absolutely.
Do you have any views as a resident, not as an employee of another TA, around a regional sort of rate that might sort of actually look at regional facilities like the Gardens, Claudelands, Frankton, the Raglan Surf Life Saving Club, that kind of regional things that where we should be funding regionally?
Yep, I think that's probably something that would be better done through the regional council and the regional rating scheme.
Thank you.
Thank you.
One further question, Councillor Pascoe.
Thanks, Chair. Look, I was interested in your comments about the new proposed pedestrian bridge. Do you feel that the two bridges on either side of where that bridge is going to go in terms of providing pedestrian and cycle access are currently inadequate to support, maybe $34 million being spent on a new pedestrian cycle bridge?
Obviously, there are two bridges that would be on either side of it.
There are, yeah.
I would say that, I think certainly for cycling, yes, because obviously bridges are quite narrow. So yes, and just enhancing that whole accessibility would be
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you
for joining us today. We appreciate it. And your patience, because I know we're running a bit late. So
thank you.
Jason, you're the lucky last for today, and sorry. And sorry for keeping you waiting also.
Oh, no, not at all.
We're all ears for your submission.
Very good. Right, so I'll talk to I think there were 3 points really on top of the tick boxes. There were sort of 3 points that I think that we made in our submission. I recently attended an online discussion where I asked Councillor Sarah, about why the budget for Claudelands was so high at $73 million over 10 years. And her response in brief was that Hamilton City Council had long been criticised for not looking after its assets. I completely applaud this. I would then ask why this ideology is not applied to other city assets, such as our community's theatres. The city's assets, such as Rivoli Theatre, Meteor and Clarence Street Theatre, are all assets of the Hamilton community, yet they do not feature in any way with renewals or asset maintenance contributions from Hamilton City Council. These are all city assets, and while they are not in the council's asset box any longer, they are far more active and more important to the city's community than the commercially run Claudelands Arena. I ask why they are also not treated as such with financial support to keep them in good condition and future-proof them for the residents of Hamilton. A simple solution would be to reduce Claudelands renewables budget by 2 or 3% and allocate this money to the arts infrastructure. You probably felt the chill in the room from the management team in H3 at this suggestion, so alternatively introduce a land levy of $1.50 or $2 per ticket purchased for events at Claudelands. This is done across New Zealand's theatres and arenas to support buildings and land improvements. For us at Clarence Street Theatre, we implemented this a few years ago. The land levy for us generates between $15,000 and $20,000 a year, an additional revenue that comes just from these tickets. Not knowing what the amount of Claudelands, the amount of tickets are sold at Claudelands, I would imagine that that's going to be 5- or 6-fold. So it gives you quite a good chunk of new money that could be allocated and ring-fenced for, say, the independent theatres of the city. The 3 community independently owned venues in the city collectively have saved Hamilton City millions and returns huge sums in terms of community wellbeing and support and activity. I implore you to look at treating these with equity as city assets, such as you do with Claudelands. They deliver more at grassroots and community than Claudelands. I think they're very, very important. The $100,000 match fund, we applaud the proposal of the new $100,000 for arts and projects. Many of us fought for a similar fund of $300,000 some years ago that was implemented but since has been absorbed. I would urge you to relook at the original proposal from Nancy Cager that was for $1 million. Maybe somewhere in the middle would be a great start. I believe Hamilton's on the verge of a really flourishing art scene and its output. And with the right support and vision, there is no reason why Hamilton could not take the title of cultural capital from Wellington. Now is the time to invest and be brave. The largest cost are capital works and equipment. The largest cost to hire Clarence Street Theatre is the cost to hire equipment. The cost to hire the theatre itself is minimal, and in fact we run community events at a loss to ensure access. Should we have access to equipment, or ideally have our own, this would make a huge difference to many community organisations in terms of their frequency of cultural concerts, community events and usage. Last year, Councillor Mark, I delivered a proposal to fund new equipment in a long-term way that would, in the end, cost Hamilton City Council nothing. I urge you to relook at this proposal. It makes sense, it's practical, and in the end, it'll only have advantages for the community. Which page am I up to? Oh, here we go. There was this one. I know some councillors can be annoyed at my constant ranting, and in fact, mentioned to some of our trustees I upset some councillors. My apologies, here and now. I'm passionate about Clarence Street Theatre. I'm dedicated to the arts in Hamilton, and I'm driven to believe that Hamilton can be a leader in the arts industry in Aotearoa. Clarence Street Theatre in the past 6 years has gone from 15% occupancy to this year being on track, despite COVID, of achieving 93% occupancy. So that's 93% of the year someone is using, attending events, shows, classes, all in our spaces. Well, some may say we haven't found our niche. I would argue that 25,000 to 30,000 people a year that attend our events and the additional 25,000 users might disagree with that. I also say watch the space. Following the trustees' recent strategic planning meeting, there are 2 exciting developments and announcements when it comes to Clarence Street Theatre's future direction. We're going big or going home. We do very much support, we very much appreciate the support we get from Hamilton City Council. A thank you to the marketing team at H3 who support our events, and a big thank you in particular to Councillor Ryan and Mark, who last year really got behind our fundraising to fix our leaking roof that was left by the previous owners. There are more people in the city taking part in arts activities than in sport. Don't get me wrong, sport is incredibly important, but so are the arts. Our theatres and art spaces are the sports grounds of our dancers, actors, musicians and artists. They are our arts playing fields. Sports grounds and facilities across the city gets millions annually to upkeep and maintain for public use. Considering their outputs for the community, can you say that our art spaces are treated with equity? Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. Questions, Councillor Wilson.
Jason, I'm fascinated to hear your narrative. I was part of council that happily gifted or handed back Clarence Street at the time. And I remember vividly the promises that if we did that, Clarence Street as an entity would go off and run it in a commercial way to be able to pay for the maintenance and the infrastructure. And here you are back again asking for more funding.
Question, please.
Well, my question is this. Do you not find that ironic and inconsistent with what you've said in the past?
No, I think it's incredibly consistent. I guess the issue was the councillors at the time gave us a venue that wasn't equipped properly.
And so this has nothing, the current financial position or the inability of Clarence to do its own maintenance has no reflection on some bad management decisions.
When did I say we can't do our own maintenance?
Well, I'm glad. Are you saying you can? So you don't
we
need our
managed
funding?
to, yeah. What I'm saying is...
What is it? Do you need our funding or don't need our funding?
I don't think that's particularly fair, with your statements, because... as I said, Clarence Street Theatre has gone from 15% occupancy when it was owned by City Council. It's now 93%. Okay, so is that not achieving something?
Okay, we won't get back into
this
debate.
is an issue about
Clear
funding.
question,
you
please.
said you were going to be self-sufficient.
And Hamilton City Council also said they would support us going into the future.
We do that through marketing.
Through marketing?
Well, through the city community.
Our annual budget in 2019-2020 was $925,000.
Right.
Hamilton City Council contributed less than 4%.
Okay, I'll ask you if you've got
For
one...
50,000 residents of the city.
Thanks, Jason.
Yeah.
I'll ask if you've got one other clear question, take it without the preamble, but if not, can I move on?
Move on.
Councillor Bunting.
Yeah, look, first of all, I take it on the chin about that sound proposal. I think I like it, and it's something I haven't circulated enough, so that's on me. But for the benefit of these councillors who haven't heard it, because I haven't spread it enough yet, could you give us the very raw nub of it? Because it's a reasonably interesting idea.
The idea was that, I wasn't, we're well aware that our funding is limited, and it wasn't about coming back to the council for money. It was actually about coming back and using the council resources to enable us to purchase that equipment or own that equipment in the long term. The idea was that the council could purchase the equipment that we need, and over a period of 5 years or 10 years, as we hire out that equipment to the community users and commercial users, it could be a shorter period, but then that money is paid back to Hamilton City Council. So in fact, the community gets to use the assets that we can hire out at a much lower rate than we have to hire in the commercial equipment. And then over that period, we pay that money back to Hamilton City Council. So in fact, it costs the ratepayers nothing, yet we've ended up with an asset that can be used by the community, and it makes it more access for those community organisations also.
Right, so at the moment, the situation is that people rent Clarence Street and they have to rent their own gear as well.
That's correct, yeah.
Right, so this is a buyback scheme.
That's right.
Thanks. Okay, I'll give my own take and I'll circulate that.
Thank you, Councillor Gallagher, and then Councillor Thompson, and then we'll bring it to a close.
Jason, obviously compliments to the trust in yourself for around the occupancy and the revitalisation of Clarence Street Trust. The Theatre Trust has given us some clear views as to what we should be presumably spending around maintenance on the Claudeland Centre. Is that right? This is obviously, this submission's been ticked off by the Theatre Trust?
Yeah, that comes from the trustees.
Have they had interaction, with our people at Claudelands just to see the reality of that particular proposal? Because obviously my zeroing in is the due diligence on maintaining a very significant asset that we have and we're responsible for.
Yeah, and it's ideally you wouldn't take anything away from the asset. That's what the suggestion in there was for the land levy, because that doesn't exist at the moment with Claudelands, but that can easily be applied, and that would be new money that could be allocated to support other arts infrastructure in the city.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson, and then a quick one from you, Dave. Councillor
Thank
Thompson.
you, Jason. The land levy idea, so you said that other theatres have used it in the country. Are there any examples of that cross-subsidisation?
You've got Isaac Theatre Royal in Christchurch use it, we use it, and other venues. I'm not sure of the arenas, but I think there's another 2 arenas that do a similar sort of thing. Okay. And so what happens is that levy is actually added on to the outside price of the ticket.
Yeah.
As a general rule, nobody notices, as a paying ticket purchaser, you don't notice it at all. Yet, cumulatively over time, over a year, for us, that's an extra $15,000-$20,000, which, in a venue the size of Claudelands, which I can only imagine there's 50 or 100,000 sort of ticket purchases, all of a sudden that's a significant amount of money that could be useful.
So is it made clear to people that so it is clear, but you're saying they don't notice it because it's not a lot?
Well, they just expect to pay fees, and and it's like roll their eyes. Oh, it's another fee. Oh, it's another fee.
Right.
But it's not going to affect. It doesn't affect it doesn't affect people's willingness to purchase a ticket.
Okay.
Thank you, Sarah. Dave.
Yeah, following similar theme, Jason. I'm not sure what you called it, but the idea of clipping the ticket or adding to the ticket and then clipping it back was suggested for the stadium as well. So I'm interested as to why you've sort of singled out Claudelands when you could single out a whole lot of different activities, whether are ticket prices or equivalents of charges around the city. Why just Claudelands?
Well, Claudelands...
Because what it's done, in my mind, is put you versus them.
That's not how I see it. I see Claudeland as our largest performing arts space. It's an event. It's a venue that has capacity to have thousands upon thousands of people come to it.
Yeah, but what about the other ones like the stadium?
Yeah, but it's not an art space, is it?
Okay, so you put yourself against Claudelands. In my mind, it's your choice.
Oh yeah, I don't see it that way, but that's fine. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. There are no further questions. Thank you for your clearly expressed, and thank you for all the great shows you've been bringing this year.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. All right, councillors, we have come now to the end of today's LTP hearings. As you know, at 3 o'clock we start. The meeting is adjourned. Can I just, councillors, I just want to run over with you how on a roll. Then after that, when we turn off the cameras, I'll just give you an update on how I will deal. If you have emailed them, that's fine too.
From this morning. The first one is, and I know that there are further submissions to come in, this is around the government's compliance targeted rate that was raised this morning, and I see that there are 2 further submissions from Chartwell and I think the base or across the way there, and that's around getting some framework around the accountability of that targeted rate in terms of how it's spent, what happens to the unders and overs, and when is the appropriate time to cease that targeted rate for those costs. I'd also like staff to have a look at longer term solutions that were advanced by Tony McLaughlin on how we can best advance or address these. And I know there's not a simple answer because I've been through the process before, but I think that I'd like to see what we can do to improve that relationship, but maintain the appropriate tension that we need to have between ourselves and developers. And the last one is around the basketball court suggestion, and I know that's come up on earlier days, and I just wonder if we could get some overview on that in the context of the renewal work that's been promised on the pavilion, because I gather that's going to be close by the pavilion. So if we can get, it may be that can be done together with the pavilion. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
Hey, James, I've just sent you a message. If you could respond, please.
I would like to get a little bit more clarity around the issue that was raised around landscaping and ongoing maintenance, and how we had a bit of discussion around that, I recall previously, but where any thinking around that's got into and what options we have, like, you know, is it a targeted rate for those areas to maintain that, or is it something else? So I'm just interested in how we deal with that problem that was raised. The basketball court's also interested, but the idea of the levy and the tickets, and then there was also something else that was going to be circulated around. So just options around supporting the community theatres. I thought it was an interesting idea. I would be interested to explore it a little bit more. And finally, maybe someone can just flip this through to me, but I don't have a lot of certainty around what the funding for the Victoria Street upgrade is currently kind of going to achieve, or what we're trying to do there, what the process is for designing that and things. So I'd just like a bit of clarity around that, because we had Mark Servan come in and talk about that yesterday, and then someone bring up that suggestion today of it being car-free. But yeah, some more info on that would be good. Thanks.
Thank you. Dave?
Yeah, look, I might have missed something relevant that Rob said, so apologies, Rob. But to do with the gardens, I'm more than happy to switch the emphasis from charging for car parks to charging for the gardens, which was one of the the entry to the, whatchamacallit gardens? Theme gardens, thank you. And to hook that in with the development of the visitor centre, which I see as a lot of submitters putting that as the alternative, and I can see lots of heads nodding around council, as I think it has grated us a lot over the years that there are we pay a lot, Hamiltonians pay a lot, and outsiders don't pay anything. If there's an alternative way, I don't think we as council should be fixed on that. So, rather than giving any more of a speech, could staff work up some dates/figures for how that might come about? Is that something that could be done? I know there has been work in the past, but
Paula, can I just give a very brief update? I know you want to get things moving. I've actually engaged Haworth International to actually upgrade that information, Dave.
Okay.
So I've already commissioned that
I'll
over the last couple of days.
That'll
come back to the deliberations. There'll be a full report on that with that option.
Brilliant.
Okay.
That's what
just
I was
capture the question at this stage. Thank you for your...
I had one other different point. I wouldn't mind a bit of an analysis on sort of a spatial analysis. Where have local roading improvements been done? Which parts of the city? And where are there gaps? Where are they? There's been asserted that there's gaps in Te Papanui, and they may well be right. Is that the only area, or is it just poor everywhere? I don't know, honestly. I've lost track because we're such a big moving feast here. But
Thank you. That's
it's a bit of intelligence, so if we're doing something, we can be equitable about it, perhaps.
Fair enough. Mark?
Thank you. I have 5. Six actually. One, can I get an update, please, on the consultation with the Davies Corner shops as to because they made some pretty serious, raised some serious issues about how short their time span was. So I'd like to just get a bit of a fresh eyes on the consultation, especially along the whole school link, please. Just doesn't have to be too much. Can I also get a rough cost of how much it would cost to put 50 to 100 metres of hit sticks down the centre line where Puketaha Road meets Gordonton Road, please? Because we're getting a lot of pushback on the cost of a $3 million roundabout there, and I want to see if something can be done for a whole lot cheaper.
You and I could do it, Bunty. It wouldn't take long.
I've already booked you in, Dave.
Okay.
Puketaha Road and Gordonton, yeah. Thank you. Thanks. Can I just, I don't want to put you to too much work, but I'd like to see if it's possible with the parklets idea of yesterday, you know, how Brian was talking about dropping that back, of making that a condition of a DC remission in the central city, to see if that's possible. Did you understand that one?
Yeah, no, we get it. Let's not get into discussion of them.
No,
but
just
I think it's
making
good
sure she understood the question, that
Yeah.
Julie understood the question. Thank you. And yeah, I would like to get circulated Jason Wade's idea of the sound system buyback scheme that he was talking about, because it's actually a pretty pragmatic one. If you haven't got that, I can send it to you. Thank you. Great. And no, that's the pay visit Moonlight Drive roundabout. I've followed the email trail on that. I'd like an update on where we're at with that lady that came in yesterday. Thank you. Cool. Thanks, guys.
Have you got any from today? Any...
No, they're all pretty good. Oh, the sound system with Clarence Street was the one from today.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Ryan.
Thanks. Okay, I'll just start on the DC stuff. I'd just like some clarity around the required and assumed at start before final actual demand. The DC said we assume, and then there's some challenge that we're sort of doing some guesswork there. Following from that, that leaves stranded or valueless site credits, and I know there's a work stream I think Greg's doing on that, but I'd just like some info on that. The cost allocation issue that Mitchellmore raises, just clarity around that. Sorry, and
what was the last one?
Cost allocation issue that was raised by Mitchellmore, and DIA policy template was referenced quite a bit of. We've heard indirectly that may not be as incongruent as has been suggested, but that was raised by Tony McLaughlin. I'd like to see just some sort of commentary around that. On to today, the Northern Suburbs presentation by Rob Dole, the largest sports club in New Zealand with no sort of facilities. I don't have an answer for it, but I just wonder if we could keep that as a placeholder to tease it out a bit more, perhaps Lance. But as Sarah's said around the budget landscaping, it's becoming a challenge, and I think potentially a targeted rate might be a way of addressing that. And also the land levy that Jason Wade mentioned, and I don't know if it flows into that ticketing option, but just some exploration around that. Yesterday, Te Papanui obviously keeps coming up. Simple things, playground, which I think staff are already aware, the community centre, but street, low level, low budget, what's our low improvement stuff around Fifth Ave, Te Ararima, Tennyson, safety access for children, that should be pretty fundamental. Gower Park yesterday, again, Lance, you could probably help me on this, Wayne Bates, around consenting pathways, around what we can do there, what needs to be done, or what the time frame transition is around that. Girls High presentation from Lale and Marie Gordon yesterday. Again, there was no funding attributed, but they're working on a 3-year timetable. If we don't do something as a placeholder, potentially we can retrospectively go there with an annual plan. But I guess what I'm flagging is, do we need to have some placeholder funding for some of these out of our consultation document discussions, and potentially, and I know we've done this with, as an example, the event sponsorship fund, where we took 10% off and we reallocated that. You remember with the balloons and we reallocated that. And I wonder, Richard, whether there's an opportunity where you suggest to staff, if you had to shave 5% off all the proposed projects and we had to reallocate based on some of these, I appreciate that's going to be a political discussion. Overnight moorings. Overnight moorings and a rephased jetty spend. Presentation from Darren Mills yesterday. That might be an opportunity, more bang for buck. So just like to explore that further. Thank you.
Thank you. Max.
Bournemouth Road, but I said that yesterday.
Yeah, I sent through quite a list yesterday after yesterday's presentations, and some I missed, so apologies for that, but my colleagues obviously are picking that up. So I won't go back over those, and you've got it. So I guess supporting the Hamilton East plans in terms of an understanding of where they are at, taking also into account the proposal for the city to uni link and the impact that that might have on Steel Park, Hamilton East, speed limits, use of that road, etc. So I think that captures the Margaret's presentation today as well. So, yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Gallagher.
Yeah, look, I'll just quickly build on Maxine's point, the Hamilton East plan. I want the plan brought back in here, and I just want to tick box what we've done with it and what we intend to do with it. I do want to just do the micro detail on the Steel Park Management Plan, because that has a historic community park aspect. It's not just another sports park. Obviously, I want to find out what our agreement is with the Sacred Heart College, given their use of that Steel Park regularly. And I realise netball courts and basketball courts are different, but of course, as we all know, the school has their open netball courts. So I'd like to see the bigger picture on that before we dive on. Certainly, I've got a feeling that there is clear money in there to upgrade the pavilion and the buildings. I'd like a bit of intel on exactly who are the Hamilton East Trust now, who are the players, because that seems really quite confusing. Yeah, no, that's fine. And also, while you're doing it, go do a forensic search, get the Frankton plan out, and we do a dust of that as well and have a look in there. And why I say that is let's either make them living documents or publicly apologise and retire them. You know, I say that in a genuine way. Secondly, the Clarence Street Theatre, look, could someone give me the exact summary of what was the deal we made with Clarence Street? For example, Riverley bought their property thanks to the Divine, you know, Gordon and my and other work. You know, they had a deal. So that was a separate. So this was a technical gifting unless they roll over. So I want to know what was the understanding at the time, and I also want to know what was our precise agreement with the board, who's accountable obviously for the submission that's been given today. I also want to know if the board has had any interaction with our team in terms of their idea Claudelands, and I wouldn't mind, you know, the so-called that land thing and the clipping the ticket stuff. So I'd like to genuinely get some, but you covered that. Hamilton Girls High update placeholder, thanks, got that. Can I just, also, I don't know if you've covered design panel, pocket parks, you know, that kind of thing versus, you know, pocket park versus a car park, and that certainly has been around. There's been talk about community houses, Enderley, and I just come back to are we as a council going to sort of take, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, the three areas of high need, so-called deprivation economics, and I picked that to be the Richmond Park area of Melville, the Crawshaw Norton area, and the Enderley area. So rather than just talk about individual community houses, we do the deep dive as to what are the ingredients in those suburbs. Because, for example, does the Enderley building need a repurpose, or does it start again, or whatever? As you recall, the library issue was also integrated with that, so just a complete breakdown. Now, that may be outside the LTP initially, with an AP fallback, because what I want to talk about is cycleways, planting, the whole, what do those areas look like, and who are our key partners? I just don't want us to talk about funding for a community house alone without the reference to the other stuff. I think our good, hard-working members of the East Ward have talked about Bournemouth Road, Road to Turn, and the traffic issues, which we're obviously following up on. Okay, so yeah. Sorry, the concern about the safety stuff. Yeah. No, and to be honest, I will get in. I'll come and you guys take me out. I want to see that because I'm picking up Macca's point. No, about the cycle routes, but to what degree? I've also witnessed people trying to use up in that area on-road cycle routes, and I wouldn't, they don't go near them. They come onto the footpath. I just want to get a bit of an idea what are the pressing, safety issues up there. Obviously, yeah, and I acknowledge that you guys know more about the micro detail because that's your patch. Thank you. Well, I walk every day, and I walk in that area, but I'll so just let's. All right.
Okay, come on. Who's next?
Yeah,
Jeff?
and sorry, just a final thing. I've asked the Clarence Street quite deliberately not to be in any way diminishing their wonderful achievement, but I just want the council to be crystal clear with the board what we agreed to and what we didn't. And I think there's got to be possibly some professional posture from our end, all right? Because you look at the Riverlea deal, you look at the Clarence Street deal, and I just can't stress, I don't want to hear stuff. If what he says is correct, absolutely cool. If not, then there has to be pushback.
Okay, thank you. Jeff, then me, very quickly, and then let's go over what should be happening this afternoon.
Already captured, thanks.
Already captured. Just a couple of, a lot of them have been captured for me, but just a couple of things. Just that parklets is already mentioned. Schedule of assets, I need to understand a little bit of the schedule asset issue vis-a-vis double dipping or not. The other thing, the Davies Corner came up. What is the process going forward to work with local business owners with that school link? Thank you. Sorry, I missed that then for you. I think, what else? I did have more yesterday. In terms of the bicultural event, or the cultural events in Hei Pō Manawa Ora, can I get some greater oversight for the deliberations about what is set aside, either in existing budgets or elsewhere, to implement actions under Hei Pō Manawa Ora, and where would we be looking to fund something like our share of a Matariki event? The other thing is, in terms of the gardens and the charging, a number of submitters have brought up alternatives to paying for parking, most interested in the buses. So interested in how we can still capture coaches or buses, interested in the timing or nature of alternative funds that would be applied when the visitation centre was open, with the new visitation. A fund for the themed gardens once the visitor centre was complete, because that's the timing around it. How does that all look? Because that... It's going to be in the report that Dave talked about. So. Yeah, so I'm just putting it there that I need a clear steer on that. Thanks, James. The other thing is with the Indali to Papa Nui, I just want to have some greater clarity around the staff, around the timing for revitalisation of parts of that community, how that's all coming together, the playground and other aspects that might come together in that multi-stakeholder approach. One update on the Sports Drome / Puketi Community Centre in terms of timeline, because, Lance, I haven't seen this since I was in Mark's shoes. Soccer pitches, just interested in how we're going with the sand carpets and additional lighting. What's the rollout of that? Poles versus jetties already been asked. In terms of Gordonton Road, I'm just going to say that my view is I want to understand at this point how we manage it for its entire length as it goes through the city, because we seem to be doing a scratch here and a scratch there, and I just need to understand that. From today, there again, the IFF and the double dipping was of interest to me. Also the idea of sell or lease surplus properties, as Auckland have done. I was wondering how many surplus properties we actually have and what they'd be worth. I mean, just want to know that. And in terms of staggering the rates over a number of years, I want to come back to that. The Kingitanga exhibition, as I understood, Lance, we had something in train, just want to understand where that sits. Is there funding for it? How long would it, far away would it be? Don't know enough about the Arts Navigator to know if we could use it. The rebranding of the museum, are there any impediments to that? And then, there's a lot in the development contributions that I'll come back to and on another day. Onion Road, for example, where are we at with this issue now? And I was a bit, this may be incorrect of the submitter, but I do want to understand when they said this landscaping won't be taken over by the council, therefore they don't want developers to do any nice landscaping, they just want them to have grass. I think that's what he said. But so I just want some clarity around that. I'm not saying it's good, right, or indifferent. There was also another fact that greenfields have got, the cost for greenfields have gone up, but brownfields have gone down, the DCs, and I want to have some clarity on that. And there was a reference to an article, a document or some guidance from the DIA on DCs. Just want to make sure we are consistent with that or why we're not. And that's it. The papers and the roundabouts, of course, little things like that that can easily be achieved. So that's half courts, how many half courts are planned and where, and share Councillor Gallagher's interest in the pavilion, because we seem to have been talking about that for some time. Excellent. Done. Can we go off public now? In terms of